All right, thank you, everyone. I call this meeting to order. My apologies, I am not Keith. Keith is not feeling well today, so I'm stepping in to assist, and please reach out to him and say, oh my gosh, please come back soon, as, you know, at your convenience.
All right, well, thank you, Ellie. Thank you for being here. And today, Ellie will be our federal official since Keith is out. So we appreciate your being here, and congratulations on your new position. So, well, welcome and bienvenidos to the March 20th, 2024 meeting of the Northern New Mexico Citizens Advisory Board. I'm going to start off by apologizing for my voice. It is March, so allergies. We, the CAB, are comprised of citizens of New Mexico from different backgrounds with different experiences and expertise. We have opened a new membership packet and are recruiting for new members. So you may nominate someone, or you may be nominated yourself, or you may self-nominate if you would like to join us. So for more information, please contact our CAB office. And to my left, I have Bridget Maestas, who is our executive director, Minnie Santisteban, who is our special liaison, senior advisor, my apologies. And Yolanda is brand new, and what is your title now? Executive assistant. So welcome to everyone who's new, and welcome to Yolanda. So what do? We provide guidance and recommendations in an advisory capacity. We are not an oversight entity. Our recommendations, guidance, and advice that we produce, we send, and the DOE Office of Environmental Management, and we approve those recommendations, and then we submit them to DOE EM. Now, what EM does, the EMLA office does, you're okay. They do the legacy waste remediation and cleanup from Los Alamos National Laboratory. That is the waste that was generated at Los Alamos National Laboratory, dating from July 1999 back to the beginning of the laboratory. That includes Cold War and Manhattan-era waste that currently resides at LANL. We, as members, serve the citizens of New Mexico from our perspectives, and we and our federal and state partners all want the same thing: safe, efficient, and transparent cleanup of legacy waste generated by Los Alamos National Laboratory. The CAB also has subcommittees where we work on recommendations in full view of the public. And while we feel passionately about legacy waste remediation, the safety of the environment and our communities, and may disagree on many points, or maybe none, in this meeting, we expect civility and mutual respect of opinions, the presentations, and discussions. So we expect the civility and respect of one another and you, the public. One of the foundations of the site-specific advisory boards, of one of which we are, is to help build the public trust by bringing all of us together to this table, to this room, including the public, to discuss legacy operations at Los Alamos National Laboratory and those communities affected by them. So we are being recorded, and our meeting will be posted on YouTube. Let's not go viral. My name is Elena, and I'm originally from Taos. I am your chair. And I'd like to introduce Patricio Pacheco, who is our vice chair. And Patricio, today is my last meeting. I have termed out. I have served 6 years, 3 terms. It's been a great ride. And so Patricio will be elevated to acting chair until November 1st. So, October 1st. It even says October here. So, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
You have my support. Now I'd like to go around the room and then online with introductions of CAB members, and I will call your name. Let's start with Roger.
Hi, my name's Roger Life. I Citizens Advisory member from Espanola area. Some of my background, I worked at the lab for about 12 years, and I worked in the fire service in Los Alamos for 19 years.
Thank you, Roger. Joseph?
Joseph Villegas, representing the Santa Fe County area in La Cienega. Also a tribal member, administrator with the Texas Band of Yaqui Indians at the Pueblo de Cocorit from Sonora, Mexico. And my background is in emergency management. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Let's see. Patricio, please.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, great. Patricio Pacheco, Vice Chair, soon to be your Chair. Here representing NNMCAB. I'm also the Water Resources Conservation Specialist for the City of Santa Fe. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Patricio. Manny?
Manny Laspront, I'm representing Santa Fe County, and I'm a retiree from LANL after 37 years.
Thank you, Manny. Marty?
I'm Marty Hewlett, representing Taos, and I'm at UNM Taos, where I'm a faculty member.
Thank you, Marty. Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Hayden. I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Been in the state of New Mexico for 10 years working for them. I've been an attorney for 35 years and currently am the General Counsel for the Retiree Healthcare Authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Now we're going to go online. Our members are online. Beverly? While we wait for Beverly, let's move on to Anne.
Good afternoon. It's Ann Laurent. I'm Los Alamos County.
Great. Thank you, Anne. We're glad you're here. And Stephen.
My name's Steve McLaughlin. I'm a retired attorney living in South Santa Fe with a background in real estate development and the production of chemical manufacturing facilities that generate hydrogen for industrial users.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Melissa.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
My name is Melissa Casillas, and I am from Taos, New Mexico.
Thank you, Melissa. And Beverly, are you able to speak? We know you're here. So, okay. So Beverly is having some audio issues. We know she's here, and we're glad for all of you who can join us in the room and online. Do we have any more?
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Hi, go ahead.
Hi. I couldn't hear what was going on. Are we just doing introductions?
Yes, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Okay, I'm Beverly Martin. I live in Santa Fe County. I'm retired from LANL about 12 years ago, and I worked there for about 25 years in waste management and environmental restoration.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. And is Jamie Villarreal online or on the phone? Okay. Do we have, well, thank you, members, for introducing yourselves. And are there any elected officials online or special guests? Okay. Any members of the public who would like to introduce themselves? Oh, Matt. Sorry, Matt. Hi, Matt. Matt Miller from Teresa Ledger Fernandez is joining us online. Let us know if you'd like to say something. And let's move to Scott.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Madam Chair. My name is Scott Kovac with Nuclear Watch New Mexico in Santa Fe. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here, Scott. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Kristen?
Hi, everyone. It's Kristen Henderson from N3B Stakeholder Affairs. Thank you.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you. Okay. And
This is Ann from Los Alamos County. I just was able to get in by phone, and it looks like I'm just getting a new link. The link that I used wasn't working, so just wanted to let you know that I'm in the audience.
Okay, and Ann, are you a member of the public?
I am Los Alamos County Council.
Oh, okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you all for your introductions, and let's move on. You should have all received a meeting packet with the agenda and presentations. Keith sends his regrets. He won't be able to attend today. We're very lucky to have Ellie in his place. So we have a few updates to our agenda. Some of our participants must leave. So let me slow down here. So a few updates to our agenda. Some of our participants have to leave early today, and so there has been a request to amend the agenda to end this meeting 15 minutes early, 4:45. Caitlin Martinez from the Hazardous Waste Bureau will give the update for Rick Sheehan, who could not attend today. And we have Brett Graveneau, I apologize, Graveneau, of N3B, and is a program manager for Mission Excellence. And we'll give the N3B co-update with Brad Smith, who is up here from N3B. Is there a motion to approve? Well, take a moment to look at the agenda. Those are the 3 items that need to be amended. And my agenda is here. So I will read the agenda and then we can make a motion to approve. I got ahead of myself. So 1 p.m. call to order. We've done that. Our welcome and introductions. And of course, we'll be replacing Keith Grindstaff with Ellie. And 1:10, old business. We'll have an update from the chair and vice chair. Update from subcommittee chairs, and if there are any other items. 1:30, new business. We'll have a special election for vice chair. That will be coming up. We'll discuss that further when we get to that point. Consideration and action on draft recommendation 2024-01, which is the fiscal year 2026 budget priorities, and that was written by an ad hoc committee of this advisory board. And then other items as needed. We'll have an update from NMED with Caitlin Martinez. And then we will have the update from EM Los Alamos Field Office by Ellie Gilbertson. And the update and look ahead from N3B with Brad and Britt. And then we'll have a break at 3:30. Sorry. Okay. And then at 3:45, we'll have the groundwater monitoring at LANL given by David Fellenz with groundwater monitoring technical lead. And then we'll have a hard stop at 4:30 for public comment period. And then the update from Bridget Maestas, our executive director, and then recognition of outgoing members. We have a few. And at 4:45, we plan to adjourn with Ellie Gilbertson instead of Keith Grindstaff. So, with those amendments in mind, considering the agenda, when you are ready, let me know if there's a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
This is Marty. I move to approve.
Thank you, Marty. Is there a second?
Joseph, second motion. to
And
approve.
Joseph, second. Shall we vote?
Aye.
Okay. Agenda as amended has been approved. Thank you. So now we can move on to old business, which is the update from the chair and the vice chair. Patricia, I'm going to let you go first. Do you have any updates?
I currently do not have any updates, but I did want to thank you, Elena, for stepping forward and drafting our recommendations and doing an awesome job of that. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Patricia. And, of course, our committee was excellent, too. Okay. So I have several updates. Bridget sent out an invitation for us to attend the DOE Order 435.1 Radioactive Waste Management Overview webinar, which will be held April 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern, which will be noon Mountain Time. The webinar will provide fundamental awareness of federal radioactive waste requirements, including enabling legislation and regulations for the generation, packaging, storage, treatment, and disposal of high-level waste, transuranic waste, and low-level waste, including mixed waste, to a non-technical audience. I have taken this, I've attended this webinar before, and it's highly useful for members and the public in general. So I encourage you to attend. Secondly, there is a waste isolation pilot plant, a WIP pre-submittal meeting. Unfortunately, it is scheduled today from 2 to 4 by the Carlsbad Field Office and the Salado Isolation Mining Contractors. That will be regarding the Class 2 permit modification requests for the waste isolation pilot plant hazardous waste facility permit. So, and then, number 3, if you would like a deeper and technical understanding into the work at EMLA and what N3B is doing, then it is a benefit to you as members and the public. Well, I can't extend it to the public just yet. Certainly to members here on the CAB to join, and some of you already have, to join the Los Alamos National Laboratory Technical Working Group on Legacy Waste, also known as the TWIG. I find it highly useful. I know several of you, especially on the Risk Evaluation and Management Subcommittee, have attended, and it is a deeper dive into the technical side of our work. I'm sorry, your work. And our work. The National Chairs Spring Meeting, the Site-Specific Advisory Board National Chairs Spring Meeting will be hosted by the Portsmouth site. We are looking for, one more member? One more member to attend. If you haven't attended a meeting, I highly encourage you to go. Put your name in with the CAB office. Okay, let's move on to updates from subcommittee chairs. Mark, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We recently had the budget review from the DOE, and that's going to drive some of our recommendations, and we're now assessing those. The legislature took a large part of my January and February. I'm so first focusing on this now, and we'll get together and have something later this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And for those of you online, and we don't have too many public members here in the audience in the room, but to those public members online, our subcommittee meetings are open to the public, and they are sent out. The information is sent out to our distribution list. And I have the Risk Evaluation and Management Subcommittee will need to hold an executive officer's election soon, as I am terming out and I am the chair of that subcommittee. The same thing for the Public Outreach Subcommittee. Any other items from the subcommittees? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to new business. So we will have a special election for vice chair. And this is a different sort of election because of since I am terming out and Patricio is coming in as acting chair. Bridget has sent out the notification to members for anyone who would like to self-nominate or nominate someone else on the CAB. Manny and Joseph have accepted the nominations and are on the ballot. Is there anyone else who would like to nominate someone else or self-nominate for vice chair? Okay. Hearing none, shall we ask them to speak? Okay. All right, so we have our two candidates. We have Manny and we have Joseph. If you would like to say something before we hand out the ballots, please do so. Who would like to go first?
Hermano.
Joseph would like for Manny to go first.
Okay, Manny, I'll go first. I'll tell you just a little bit more about myself. Like I said, 37 years at LANL. Looking at the budget priority list we've been working on for the last month, I realized in my career I've probably touched on about every aspect of that in one phase or another. Prior to my life at LANL, I was a roughneck in the oil fields of Texas. I was one of the youngest drillers in the oil patch when I left. I was 19 years old at the time. I worked derricks for 2 years and then drilled for a year. Then I came to LANL. I've had a lot of titles here. I worked my way up from supervisor, superintendent, project manager, emergency manager, deputy group leader, and program manager when I retired. During that time, done a lot of things. I managed, one of the first things I did was manage the stormwater program. Not the water, but the pipes themselves. I did the maintenance on that. I did a lot of hazmat responses and a lot of hazmat cleanups. I was on board in the late 80s when we really started getting active. I was certified as a hazmat site worker supervisor, and eventually hazmat incident commander. Like I said, I was an emergency manager for LANL. I've responded to hundreds of incidents on site, and I've probably physically put hands on most of these sites that we'll be discussing during our time here. I put the genie in the bottle on many of them. I was certified as a OSHA or a FEMA hazardous incident commander, as well as a safety officer. I focused on the safety part of that because I thought that was a very critical part of just my incident response program. I truly lived that life, and I'm paying for that now. Then, by the time I retired, I got into the wildland fire portion, and I established the wildland fire program at the laboratory, and that's where I finished out. And that's kind of the highlights. Now, some of the lows, I'm a victim of exposure to some of the materials I was exposed to at LANL. I was forced into early retirement because of that. I'm disabled. I'm personal family members in the same boat, and I've buried many friends that were victims of the same thing. So I have a deep personal interest in making sure that this work that is continued on done safely and properly. So the other thing is like I said, I'm retired, and I hope never to have to do this again. But I did speak to Patricia, and like I said, I have deep concerns about the work that is being done here, and I think it's probably my duty to step forward and help where I can. On the other hand, if I'm not elected, I'm not going anywhere, and I'll still be here to assist wherever I can. And if you do chose to vote and make me Patricia's assistant, I'll be glad to do the best I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny. I appreciate all your work and your service over the years and everything that you've endured. And I find most people here very exceptional people. So, thank you. Okay. Joseph.
Hermano Manny, thank you for your service. I know exactly what you're going through in your lifetime, and I respect the work that you do, and you continue to do the work. My name is Jose Lorenzo Villegas Sr. That's my mother's name, Jose. Joseph is my government name. And so, you know, I thought about it when I heard about the possibility of the vice chair position being open. And I just got back from a Homeland Security conference, or not a conference, but it was a 9th Tribal Nation Week with at the Center for Domestic Preparedness there in Anniston, Alabama. And I got a chance to meet and do an actual government-to-government consultation with our FEMA administrator and the deputy administrator and the FEMA tribal affairs representative. And what was interesting about the conversation was it was about leadership. And I really believe that this CAB here in northern New Mexico, the way it's been run, the leadership has been outstanding and professional. And I'm into the collaboration issue, about collaborating. We may not agree with certain things that's going on with a government agency like here in Los Alamos or Sandia or wherever, by all respects. But we can get something done in terms of keeping the positive outcome. And that's what it's about. Yes, I have some credentials, and my background is emergency management. But for my tribal nation, the Texas Band of Yaqui Indians, the Pueblo of Cocorit from Sonora, Mexico, what happens with our tribal nation impacts all tribal nations when it comes to the work that we're doing here with the CAB. And the best thing that we can do is work together to find a positive outcome. I keep going back to positive outcome because I don't like negative outcomes. And when it comes to leadership skills, it's about being culturally competent, culturally sensitive, because this ain't New York City. This is northern New Mexico. This is New Mexico, and it has its own sacred place with LANL. And so, said that, I'm not a follower. And definitely I'm not a stakeholder. I'm not another DuPont corporation. I'm not another banking institution. Our tribal nation is not. We are government to government, collaboration, consultation. And being on the board here, it's an honor. And I like to continue with the leadership skills, set skills, professional in the story. Muchas gracias. Thank you for your time.
Gracias, Joseph. I almost what I said to Manny could be said similar to you, because you're both exceptional people of service, and you care. And yes, you have credentials, but you're also, and not but, and your passion for helping your friends, your neighbors, your community, that's part of what the CAB is all about. And it's not about you, it's about all of us. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So we have a tough decision ahead of us, clearly. Ballots will be passed out to members in the room. Online members, please vote. Yolanda Valdez has sent an email to you. Please respond to her email as ASAP so that we can get the vote. And we'll announce the vote once it's ready, or at the end.
Once we get everybody.
Okay. Once we've tallied the votes, we'll let everyone know. Thank you.
Excuse me, did I hear that anybody could vote?
So the voting is open to advisory board members, and advisory board members who are not present in the room, who are joining us online, they have been sent a special ballot for them to vote. So thank you. And who's speaking? Just so that
This is Melanie, Los Alamos County Council.
Excellent. Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you. No, this is specific to advisory board members.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. So while our votes are being tallied, Let's move on to our next item on the agenda. So we have a consideration and action on draft recommendation 2024-01 fiscal year 2026 budget priorities. They should be in your packet. They have been circulated. It has been circulated. Some members have sent in their edits and their comments. Those have been considered and the document has been edited. Please take a moment to review, and if there is any discussion, please let
Madam
us-
Chair,
Yes?
this is Steve McLaughlin.
Hello, Steve.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you? Thanks for being here.
Another day in paradise. Based on a quick read, I found what seemed to me to be 3 typographical errors. Should I list those and let you consider same?
Is this is the most recent version?
Yes,
Okay,
it's the one attached to the packet last night.
okay, excellent. Yes? Yes, please.
And then page 1, line 22. At the end of that line, the words "the NMCABs" I think should come out, so it just says fulfillment of that opportunity and responsibility. It reads awkwardly otherwise. That's the first one on line 25. The second word "the" is duplicative and should come out. And then on page 2, line 51, I think the word "possible" should be removed. You may have left it in, but I think when I looked over it came out. But those are the 3 things that look to me like typos. Sorry, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't believe possible is a typographical error. It is best available science and data possible, or available. We already have available ones for available science and data.
It just seemed like best available always covered the possible, so.
Any other comments from members about that section? Thank you, Stephen.
No worries.
Should we remove it? Does anyone agree we should remove it or keep it in, or change? Do we have another editorial change on that or comment?
Madam Chair, how do I put this in a good sense and good words? I believe that the term "possible" should be left in there. And I think that sometimes when we look at these technical documents, when I say we, I mean the board, should be really a little cautious about not reading into it. Yes, there is the dictionary there, Webster dictionary, so forth and so on, but every time when it comes down to some of these technical documents, there's always, for some reason, there's interpretation, definition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think to stop reading into it is my take, my opinion. I own it, but I think that the term "possible" is appropriate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joseph. Yes, in many technical documents, you're correct, we do use the word "possible" quite often, so we've kind of abutted against typical vernacular and then what we use in the technical world. So that's why the term "possible" is there, and that gives us some breathing room, because as science advances, then we can apply those if they are applicable. So that would be the possibility of advanced science. Anyone else, Joseph? Okay. Okay. Any other edits? Any other comments? Anyone online? Okay, so seeing none, I recommend we make those 2 edits that Stephen on line 22 and 25, and retain the word possible on line 38 in that sentence. Do we have any?
Madam Chair, the word possible that I was concerned about was on line 51.
Oh, 51, apologies. I don't have it in front of me. No, that is also correct.
That's the one.
Yes, apologies, yes, line 51. Okay, so the two edits that Stephen suggested, the two grammatical error edits and I suggest we accept, and then we keep the word possible on line 51. So with that in mind, and no more edits or comment or discussion, as amended, we move forward with voting on the recommendation. Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we have a second?
Joseph, so moved. Madam
Joseph.
Chair.
Joseph, we have a second. Thank you. Okay, shall we vote? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Beverly, thank you. All right, excellent. So majority, and as amended, that is the recommendation that we will fix and then submit to DOE. Excellent. Thank you, and thank you to the ad hoc committee for your comments and your involvement. Joseph.
Madam Chair, thank you so much for taking the time with the staff as well to work on those recommendations, and the way the language is written, it's set stone. It was, I'm very proud of you guys for doing that. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you all. Marty, thank you. Okay. Oh, and, well, here we go, other items. Ellie has the results from the election. Would you please go ahead?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for voting on your future leadership. And I know it is not typically our place to provide this commentary, but I do want to say I believe both candidates were exceptional candidates for this role. With that said, I would like to read that the results are Manuel received 6 votes, Jose received 4 votes, and so the committee has voted on Manuel.
Well, thank you for your votes of confidence, and I'll do my best.
Congratulations, Manny and Joseph. Thank you for stepping in. There will be many more opportunities, I guarantee you. And there are also committees that need leadership. I know of one in particular. Two in particular. So consider that. I appreciate it, and Manny, thank you. Okay, so we are moving along quickly, and Caitlin Martinez is from the New Mexico Environment Department Hazardous Waste Bureau, and will be giving the update on behalf of Rick Sheen and NNMCAB. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and participate in the CAB meeting. It's always a great time. Rick sends his apologies for meeting conflicts today, and of course wishes he could be here, but we'll roll through the update list here. And again, just to introduce myself, I'm Caitlin Martinez, and I'm serving as the acting LANL group manager, focusing on the corrective action side of the house. That's what I'm most familiar with, but if other questions pop up, I'll try my best to accommodate those. So we'll start with the consent order. The fiscal year 2024 Appendix B was submitted last July. NNMCAB and DOE have met multiple times over the course of this past couple of months to negotiate the proposals, and we've come to an agreement, so NNMCAB is awaiting the submission of the final Appendix B, and we'll move forward with scheduling and coordinating the public meeting on that. And then in the groundwater side, R73 was our last well before we started the current one active, and that one was plugged and abandoned in September 2023, and DOE submitted the causal analysis for that failure to NMED in December of 2023. And we issued, as I know this has been in multiple updates, but we issued a notice of disapproval for the chromium interim measures and characterization work plan on May 31st of last year. And our NOD required that DOE propose an alternative injection location as part of revisions to that document. And we've had multiple meetings in July and in October to really talk about those NOD comments and try to come to an agreement. And NMED has reviewed comment responses from DOE and issued feedback on those in a letter sent in January 3rd. And we're anticipating the revision of that coming, I believe, in July of this year. And the well we're working on currently is the R76. We approved the drilling work plan for that on June 8th, and drilling construction of the well started on September 21st. And DOE requested a variance from the New Mexico Office of the State Engineer for the approved R76 permit on November 24th of 2023. And NNMCAB denied the variance request on November 28th and suspended the permit for R76 until DOE submits the required information for that variance request. NMED met with NMOSE and DOE on March 18th to discuss OSE requirements for permit submissions in the future and permit requirements for this variance request. So now we've been paused since November on that well, but are looking forward to moving progress forward again soon. And then moving forward, DOE submitted a revised drilling work plan for another regional aquifer well in the chromium plume area, and that's R79, and that was submitted October 27th. And this was to accommodate NMOSE's requirement for single screen wells in the region. NMED reviewed that submission, and we issued review comments on that on January 22nd, and we're awaiting a revision to that document again for approval. And the last well I think we've been working on, DOE had submitted a permit application for regional aquifer well R80, also in the chromium plume area. And NMOSE returned that permit application on January 3rd due to it being a proposed dual screen design. So NMED will review a revised drilling work plan for R80 to accommodate that single screen design. And the chromium interim measures project has been, at least the injection and extraction operations have been shut down since April 1st. And DOE and NMED have not yet agreed on a path forward, but NMED again has required that DOE propose an alternative injection location for the contaminated water to resume operations. And that leads us into the letters that were sent back and forth on this operation of the interim measures, and it started with a letter sent from NMED to DOE on September 6th to propose a path forward for continued remediation of the chromium plume. And in that letter, NMED provided acceptable corrective actions that would allow for a temporary recommencement of injections while this alternative injection location is proposed and developed. And we also discussed the need to retain an independent mediator, and that was based on the recommendation, as I'm sure you guys have heard of, the GAO and of that Radioactive and Hazardous Materials Interim Committee. So DOE responded to our September 6th letter with a letter December 5th that stated disagreement with the proposed corrective actions and our conditions, and also requested approval to resume injection operations. And lastly, they stated that DOE retain the Savannah National River Laboratory to conduct an independent technical review of interim measures operations. So NMED and DOE have selected panelists, and we're in the process of beginning that review. And NMED also responded to the December 5th correspondence with a letter on February 6th, and this was a second compromise for partial injection operation while DOE agrees to long-term protective measures. And in that, we extended the time for the temporary authorization and discussed a little bit further ways that we could try to find a compromise in the middle of this. So in that, we just prioritize that the importance of action and protecting the aquifer while this independent review is underway. So that's kind of the chromium plume area. That's where we're at. And NMED is currently reviewing a drilling work plan for a regional aquifer well, Simmer 3, and that one's on Pueblo de San Ildefonso property. And that one is currently proposed, and that drilling work plan is a dual screen design, and it's to monitor potential contamination south of our injection locations on Pueblo lands. So we're continuing discussions with DOE and the Pueblo de San Ildefonso, their Department of Environmental and Cultural Preservation, to determine if Simmer 3's construction will be completed as a dual screen or as a single screen design. And we had a three-party meeting February 8th to present the positions from both NMED's perspective and from DOE's perspective on, benefits and concerns with this dual screen design. And we'll issue a response after the tribal council has made their decision on what design they would have, and we'll support that in our approval. So on to our corrective action documents here. We issued our statement of basis for MDAC on September 7th. And in that, NMED proposed that the remedy include the excavation of waste for appropriate final disposal and an active soil vapor extraction system to remediate the VOC plume. The final remedy for MDAC will be selected after considering input from the public. The public comment period originally ended on November 6th, and NMED received 3 requests for public hearing on the statement of basis. And those were from Triad National Security, from EMLA and N3B, and also from Nuclear Watch New Mexico. So we're in the process of scheduling the public hearing, and the public comment period on that statement of basis has been extended automatically to the close of that public hearing. So anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to make comment on that, we certainly encourage that while the public comment period's extended. Thank you. It's the time of year, I'm telling you. We're here though. And then we're also working with Los Alamos County and DOE to schedule a public town hall on that remedy selection. So just to give an opportunity for Los Alamos County residents to really state, concerns or state support or opposition to the state's proposed remedy selection on that. And I believe that is scheduled for June 10th. Don't quote me on it quite yet, but that'll be an opportunity for county residents to discuss remedies and the proposed final remedies selected by NMED. And we look forward to that. And then we issued a review letter for the biennial asphalt monitoring and removal report for AOC C00041 on March 18th. And we also attended the Natural Resource Damage Assessment Trustee Council meeting on March 6th. And that was an opportunity to discuss this potential for trustee input in remedial design and early restoration activities as part of corrective action remediation with some sites. So that was a nice input to get from trustees on that. Then moving to Middle DP Road site, NMED approved that solid waste management unit assessment report for Middle DP Road site on February 14th. On the LANL permit, the renewal application was submitted in 2020. We've sent 2 administratively incomplete determinations, and right now we're just waiting. We're expecting very soon the submission of a revised application, and that will include an additional storage unit from the original submission. And then a quick WIP update. So that rounds out LANL stuff. And for WIP, The permit renewal, that final permit renewal became effective November 3rd of last year. The permittees are implementing new permit conditions that are focused on legacy true waste disposal plan at present. And more information on this can be found at our Hazardous Waste Bureau WIP page. And then also for WIP, there are upcoming PMRs. We have a Class 1, 2 item package submitted March 19th, 2024. And in renewal negotiations, WIP permittees agreed to submit these two Class 1s. Item 1 is to revise the text in Permit Part 1, Section 1.15.1 regarding tribal community notice and involvement. And item 2 on that is to revise text in Permit Attachment A1 concerning the flood zone designation for the WIP facility. And the Class 2 is also a 2-item package. That's the pre-submittal meeting Director Sheen is at today from 2 to 4 that you mentioned. And it's anticipated for submittal April 1st, 2024. And public notice is anticipated April 2nd, 2024. And item 1 on that is about the addition of new shielded container assemblies. And item 2 is a graded approach to audit. So that's the WIP permit, and just real quick on WIP shipment updates for 2024. There's been a total of 52 shipments. It looks like the breakdown by generator site. We have 39 from Idaho National Lab, 5 from Los Alamos National Laboratory, 5 from Savannah River site, and 3 from Oak Ridge National Lab. Whew. That should round out the state's update. Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thanks for hanging in there. It is March, but I appreciate your update. Excellent. I'm doing the same thing now. Ellie, would you like to go ahead while I joke?
I hope you're not really joking. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate you appreciate having the opportunity to update you on our statuses. So I'm actually going to start with an update on the field manager transition. So I know back in January, Michael did share with you that he is being called to serve another role in the Department of Energy. He's going to the Savannah River site, onto the National Nuclear Security Administration side of the House, and this was at the request of the Secretary. So Michael is being called away. Effective March 24th, which is Monday, next week, I have the honor of serving as the acting manager for EMLA. So I'll be temporarily filling in Michael's shoes as we continue the search for the permanent field manager replacement. I'm looking forward to that, and I truly am honored and humbled by this opportunity to serve my organization, to serve you all, and to continue to work with N3B as they execute our very important mission up here. So more to come, but we will absolutely keep the CAB informed as we make progress on the selection of the replacement. That's a very important role for the department. Regarding moving on to the budget, regarding the FY24 budget, I'm sure you've all seen this in the news report. However, I am very happy to report that Congress has approved a budget for FY24. The funding details by site are still in progress. We're still working through that, but this is excellent news, and it will help us continue to ensure that we are funding our cleanup mission and getting this cleanup actualized. So moving on to the hexavalent chromium plume. So Caitlin did mention a couple of these points. There has been some back and forth correspondence regarding DOE's urgent desire to resume the chromium interim measure campaign. And in evaluating some of the state's concerns, we proposed a compromise to resume injection in places that were not identified as concern by the state. The state had identified some locations that were concerning, and so our compromise was to do a partial resumption. And unfortunately, in February 6th, we received We received a letter back from the state. We're still continuing to evaluate that, but it does not appear that this request for a partial resumption is being considered. So we are going to be responding to that very quickly here in the days, not weeks. But within the 6 months that the chromium interim measure has been shut down as a result of the state's direction, we have seen a rebound in chromium concentrations in key wells. Now, we've communicated this regularly with the state, and I just want you all to know we remain very concerned about these increases. We're continuing to monitor these wells, and we are continuing to engage and maintain an open dialogue with the state so that they can appreciate and understand the impact of this and our desire to urgently resume operations. Even if it's a partial operation, that is our top priority because we are very interested in this. So we have some other updates in the area of environmental remediation, and I'd like to provide those with you as well. We have had regular meetings with the New Mexico Office of the State Engineer. We're working through permit approvals for new wells, and we're acquiring data necessary to design a remedy, of course, after NNMCAB selects that remedy. Additionally, we have been working closely with the Pueblo de San Ildefonso on plans for drilling a second monitoring well on the Pueblo lands. As Michael updated you in January, EMLA and NMED have engaged in experts, not from Savannah Riverside, rather the network of national laboratories for environmental management and stewardship, so NLEMS, to perform a technical review and to help facilitate discussions between the department and the state in order to resolve these differences of professional opinion. We want to get this resolved quickly. The review team has been agreed by both NMED and EMLA, and there are 14 team members with participation from NLEMS, from industry, from academia, and from the EPA Region 6. So looking across the board for a diverse set of recommendations to truly help us get to the bottom of this. The team is being led by Dr. Inez Trier. She's the interim dean, the College of Engineering and Computing for Florida International University. And this review is a top priority for the department. It has kicked off this week. We are providing, both the department and the state are providing presentations and technical information, and they are receiving that information and reviewing it as we speak. We are also continuing to conduct weekly meetings between EMLA, NMED, and this technical review team. So in addition to them being out here this week, we are regularly engaging. That in-person meeting is being hosted this week, and as I mentioned, we are providing everybody with the pertinent information. We're going to be coordinating public engagement opportunities on this review in the future, and I just want to alert everyone and to assure everyone DOE intends to adhere to the commitments and to the outcome of what this expert technical review team tells us, even if they tell us we are dead wrong. And that's not something we want to hear. That is something we will adhere to, because we need to continue to move forward on this. So I want to make sure you all had that commitment from the department. So that wraps up my briefing for you all today, and I'm happy to address any questions, Madam Chair, if anybody has any.
Thank you, Ellie. I appreciate your update, and that's a lot of information, and it's good to know the path forward, and that that technical review, external review, is going to be helpful to DOE and to NMED, as we had hoped for, and then we can come to a resolution for all of us. So I appreciate that, and appreciate your work on this. So as Caitlin and I were reacting to March, I skipped over if there are any questions for Caitlin or Ellie. Apologies. Yeah, now that we've recovered somewhat our voices. So if there are any questions or comments for Caitlin and Ellie, let's open it up. I see Mark was first, and then we'll go to Joseph. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is probably to Caitlin, and you gave a very detailed description, so I appreciate that. My understanding of the way the chromium plume is approached is that the hexavalent chromium is extracted, and then there's an injection component of it with the intent that that will form a pressure wall to keep migration from happening. And I've asked many people at DOE whether or not this has ever been done before successfully, and I never really got a clear answer. I asked if there was any modeling support for that, and I was never given a clear answer. So my question is, does the New Mexico Environment Department agree that the pressure wall approach is a temporary acceptable alternative for injection or not?
I think the way I'll answer this, and please let me know if I don't get to it acceptably, but from our evaluation of looking at the IM operations running consistently for about 5 years, is we don't see significant indications from the data that the injection wall essentially that we build is having a noticeable impact on the water table and in such a way that it would cause hydraulic control. And what we see is a cone of depression. So we see that water table decrease from the pressure pool from the extraction wells. And that's where we see success. And we understand that, you know, in a sole source aquifer where water is such an important resource for us, that the water we extract has to be returned. And we understand the need for injection as its intended purpose is, but what we're saying is that injection itself isn't causing hydraulic control of preventing contaminant migration. And what we're saying is there's concerning trends for us that we believe are resulting from injection operation in the eastern region, and we'd like to see the department find another place to put the clean water that is not hydraulically connected to the plume and wouldn't cause these concerning trends the way the state has commented on since I think 2021 now. Does that answer? And what I will, there has been successful, I would say, from my evaluation of studies, is that injection to form a pressure wall, like you're saying, works in different areas. Like I've seen near ocean where you have saltwater infiltration, that people have used successfully this, you know, injection of clean water to create a boundary between, you know, clean water aquifer and infiltration from saltwater zones. But from my site assessment, I haven't really seen injection utilized the way that we intended with the interim measures and successfully implemented that way.
Thank you, Caitlin. I hesitated to inject this, not intended, that was not a pun. What I didn't say was that one of the reasons I heard at one point was that hauling water that's extracted is relatively expensive. So injection is a favored mechanism if it can be used. Maybe just to ask the question point blank, was the cost factor of injection versus hauling part of that equation from an environmental standpoint or not?
And that's, I'll do my best to answer. It's the groundwater side of the house, and they're this, you know, beneficial use of the water and making sure that we're returning, not using as much water under the permit. There's a certain amount of use that you can have. So injection kind of circumvents that requirement. If we're extracting everything, we're treating it, and we're pumping right back in, we're not using any water rights of that aquifer, which we think is beneficial. And in relation to trucking it out and taking water out of that regional aquifer, we think injection as far as returning water to the aquifer is a good idea, and that's the way it'll likely happen in this area. So it's not as much cost focus as it is on the environmental impacts of pumping the water and not returning it to the same aquifer, or even land disposing the amount that reaches and evaporation and stuff. It does have some use come out of that, and we take some of those water rights. But we just want that injection of clean water to occur outside the plume, not in areas where we have contamination above regulatory standards, so we can assure that we're not smearing or spreading that plume in unanticipated directions as a result.
Thank
Thank you, Caitlin. And just to clarify, so that land application and reinjection of water is to maintain and restore the water balance in that area?
Yeah, exactly. So it's part of the permit on how much they can pump and use. And like I said, that's thankfully where groundwater takes the lead, and I don't have to focus on it as much, but it's to really avoid this cutting into water rights in the region and save our sole source aquifer for residents in New Mexico.
Okay, excellent. So that would be under the Office of State Engineer for the permit, and then, of course, the Groundwater Quality Bureau for groundwater quality.
Yeah, they'll do the underground injection control permit, and they'll do, they also permit the land application discharges from Water Protection Division. So it's kind of a split regulatory decision there, but thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of regulators at play here. So any other questions or comments for either Ellie or Caitlin? Oh, sorry, apologies. Jose, I did say you were next. You're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Don't look at me.
I know I'm small, you could barely see me. We're good. Madam Chair, Caitlin, just one little question here. When you mention independent mediator, what does that mean?
That's what Ellie was getting into. So we have this team of panelists come in, and we're trying to get all these subject matter experts that have really worked in groundwater remediation and worked in characterization and important aspects, also EPA for the regulatory perspective, to really give a holistic path forward approach for this. And it's been pretty clear from both sides that we have what we see as a path forward. The Department of Energy has what they see as a path forward for remediation in this area, and right now they're not in alignment. So the intention of this is to provide a third-party opinion on that and really guide some of these issues we haven't resolved independently.
Madam Chair, Caitlin, the only reason why I'm asking the question about the independent mediator, I'm looking at it from a perspective of from an indigenous perspective about what the water lawa means to right here, and how important that water is vida, it's life. And I take it on a personal level because I understand how a plume works, because I have a plume underneath my well, underneath my tierras benditas in La Ciénaga. But that's a different chemical. I have PFOS, PFOA, et cetera, 6 compounds. And out of those 6 compounds, 3 of them are in my blood. So saying that, I take it personal and professional from my tribal perspective of when we talk about independent mediators doing this conversation, they're SMEs, do they really understand what water means to the people in the norte, in the northern part of our state? And I'm not throwing that on you. I'm just saying, if they're coming on board and they're subject matter experts, do they really understand what, from the culturally perspective, culturally sensitivity-wise, what their functions are, what their purpose are, and what they're trying to do on both sides, whether it's the state, whether it's LANL, when they're talking to each other, trying to resolve their differences, do they understand both sides of what that means to the people that live down here? And that's all I have. You don't have to answer that if you don't want.
No, totally understood. And that's definitely through some of these presentations and stuff. We do have one panelist that's from New Mexico, so we're hoping that there's at least a snippet of understanding on how important that resource is for all New Mexicans, and particularly in areas like that that have, sole source aquifer that supplies so many people. But we also want to really make that point, drive it home to everyone else that lives in different kind of areas of the United States that have totally different values for water than New Mexicans had, and really kind of focus in on how important it is and how many people are affected by potential contaminant migration and extending that any further to the aquifer, including the time that we have contamination. These are all things that impact all of us that live here and reside here and make this our home. So we're hoping our presentations for those that aren't from New Mexico can really give that perspective truly, because that's what the state's here for, and that's what we're trying our best to do, is really accommodate that and make sure the Department of Energy and everybody understands how important these sole source aquifers are.
Madam Chair, Caitlin, thank you so much for the response. I accept it. It's awesome, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Caitlin. Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a technical question. If, as was discussed, the interim measures, when they stopped, you thought that there was no evidence that there was a barrier that had been created by the injection. What then accounts, and this is for both Ellie and you, Caitlin, what then accounts for the rebound in chromium in the measuring wells at the cessation of injection after that?
Well, from the state's perspective, and I'll let Ellie speak for the department's perspective, but it's a long issue, and before the shutdown, there was some back and forth with kind of this impending. There's concerns with injection, and how are we going to handle those concerns and address them in a protective manner moving forward? And when the state didn't feel like those opinions and perspectives were being taken into adequate consideration, we opted for the shutdown of injection. And in response to that, DOE did provide an assessment of modeling results and telling us, if we shut the IM off today and keep it shut off, this is what we anticipate trends to look like. And from the information DOE provided, we all anticipated a little longer time before we see the rebounds that we are seeing now. And looking at it, and just from an initial assessment, what we're concerned with is that those injection wells in the southern end were diluting. We were pushing clean water in zones that had contamination, and now that we've gone almost a year, the plume is moving back in those zones that we originally had diluted or had pushed clean water into. So now we're seeing the response to that more dramatically or more quickly than we anticipated seeing. So ours is kind of saying it's not necessarily a success of the injection operation, but it could be giving us information that maybe there's something else happening in the southern region that we don't fully comprehend the way we should.
So let me just preface by saying, I think at the heart of going to the independent technical team is, and I can see it on body language every time we have this kind of open discussion of an exhaustion, about a fatigue, about the fact that we simply cannot achieve a technical agreement. Because I'm about to tell you that we believe that the hydraulic pressure is working. And that is the reason for the rebound, is that once you have removed that hydraulic barrier, you have nothing holding it back. And we have a lot of modeling, as Caitlin suggests, that supports that. We have a technical posture, a technical basis that supports that. But fundamentally, we have a difference of professional opinion. And so both Caitlin and I can give you our perspectives from our organizations until our faces turn blue. That's not going to satisfy we are not going to reach resolution of this differing professional opinion today. And so, again, I could elaborate on the technical basis that we have, but I don't think that's really going to resolve the concern of this audience. And that is fundamentally why we went to this technical third party. And as I emphasized, DOE intends to abide by those recommendations. We intend to follow through on the recommendations of that third party, because we really need to resolve this and move forward.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Marty. Marty, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Did you have a? Okay, thank you. Roger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if this is a question that could be answered at this meeting, but I've been out to the well sites and on our tours and so on. And I made a comment at one of the visits that we had, and Manny
I'm using Bixby Text Call to convert your voice to text and respond to you. If you want to continue.
So I was going to say Manny can probably have some input as far as dealing with hazmat. Sometimes they suggest dilution is a solution. And I'm not saying that that's what's going on here, but at the same time, when you have a hazmat incident, part of the concern with the hazmat is stopping the contamination, the flow of contamination. And being out at the well drilling site, looking at the location where the contamination is coming from, it's almost 2 miles as the bird flies for that contamination to be coming into the area where the plume is at. Do you have kind of an idea how long it's going to take to remediate, or is this going to be a multi-year or decade operation? Thank you, Madam Chair.
At least from my perspective, an overall groundwater remediation for these is not a quick process. And realistically, we're looking at not a quick remediation, even when we get to a point to select a final remedy. So I'd like to be realistic, and EPA suggests a reasonable amount of time for a remedy in groundwater, is less than 30 years. So I at least say I have job stability for a little while in the chromium plume. But we'd like to see active remediation, and we think there's many ways to optimize this, and that's all based on characterizing adequately. And like you're saying, there's contamination in the Vados zone that hasn't even touched the regional aquifer yet, and we haven't characterized enough to know when that contamination is going to reach and in what magnitudes, and some of these issues that build into final remedy that are part of our uncertainties with the project as it stands now, and uncertainties in making regulatory decisions until we can feel sure that they're protective.
Yeah, and thank you for your response. This is Roger.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Caitlin. Do we have any members online that would have any questions for Caitlin or Ellie? Okay, none. All right. So at the end of this review, and the results are submitted, the recommendations are submitted, we've heard DOE's perspective, and NMED, when the recommendation is sent to you, what would be the path forward with NMED then? Is there one? I know it's very preliminary.
Yeah, I mean, we
Premature.
certainly are taking all consideration of the independent review, and this is where the regulatory perspective kind of splits. And from me on Hazardous Waste Bureau, our remediation is under the consent order, and the issue that stands is based on injection into these wells, and that's primarily on groundwater qualities, cessation of injection activities. And what Haz Waste would like to see, although our ideas converge a little bit, we want to see an expansion of the interim measures, and we want to see expanded treatment, expanded remediation until we get to a place for final remedy selection. But definitely from Haz Waste perspective, we will consider that, and we certainly want to, same as the Department of Energy, we are biased towards action, and we want something forward motion and forward remediation and characterization efforts as soon as possible, so we're not elongating this time and potentially expanding the area in which our plume currently is known to exist. So hopefully that answers the question as much as I can.
Well, thank you. So yeah, similar to what our advisory board does is we send in our recommendations, and we that is taken under consideration, and then the path forward is determined from there. So, okay. Thank you. Mark, you had a...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I wonder if it would help the parties, Department of Energy and the NMED, after the technical committee has its report, if that could be shared with the CAB and the CAB could provide a recommendation on what's stated in that report.
Any?
Obviously, this is a joint agreement, right? So we couldn't make any commitments today to share a document that is both from the state and the Department of Energy, but I will absolutely take that request back to the team, and we'll report back in the next CAB meeting if we can take an action to make sure we do that. We'll report that back in the next CAB meeting. I don't anticipate it will be resolved before the next CAB meeting, so we have plenty of time to get you an answer.
All right. Well, thank you.
That's above my pay grade for sure, but I will take that recommendation back to the division director and certainly update same as they will.
I think you both.
Yeah, thank you. And Jose.
Madam Chair, you know, it's interesting just listening to how those two agencies are working with each other. But after everything's all said and done and the recommendations are done and the letter is done, the agreements are done, who's going to do what? Where does the community fit in terms of mitigation of involving an emergency management issue? If that plume went out of control, ended up in Sanai, or went into the regional aquifer, what is the regional aquifer, first of all? Is it the Tesuque Basin? Is it the Ancha? Is it the Española Basin? The Rio Grande, the main tributary? What is a regional aquifer, first of all? And if the plume has gotten there and it's going south, what about the mitigation plans, the hazmat mitigation plans for those 2 counties, 3 counties, even including the tribal nations that are along the Rio Grande? Where does that fit in with LANL, and where does it fit in with the state? I don't know, whoever can answer that question. Or does it even apply?
So I guess as just a start, it's the Española Basin aquifer, and that's where the contamination is. We have chromium contamination in the regional aquifer. And the reason it went into interim measures was because of the proximity of the plume to migrating off-site, and the whole intention of interim measures is to prevent off-site migration and prevent that contamination from reaching receptors. So for us, we're keeping it away from county production wells. We're keeping it away from off-site migration. That's why we implemented this injection and extraction well network. Originally, it was to keep it on LANL property, maintain its extent of contamination within the furthest extent it was at the time, until we're ready to develop this full remediation plan. And at least speaking for the state, we certainly encourage and public facilitation on this as frequent as possible, and we would certainly support that and encourage any inclusion of that in interim measures as far as reporting requirements. And for us, it isn't just a requirement of final remedy selection, but certainly at that time it's a regulatory requirement to come to the public, same as we did with the remedy selection for MDAC. So we'd like to see that beforehand, and we do give updates, I believe, quarterly to the public, but we think that's an area of definite improvement.
Madam Chair, thank you, Caitlin. I appreciate that. I was always wondering, because the Española Basin is right at the tip of the Ancha and the Tesuque Basin, right where I live. And so if that baby is not controlled and it ends up over there, other than the PFAS that I'm dealing with in my community, it's a whole different ballgame. The mitigation issue, the hazard mitigation plan issue for those 2 counties, Los Alamos County and Santa Fe County, I'm not very impressed. Right now, they're doing their final update for the county of Santa Fe. I'm not impressed. but I'll deal with it on the next round. But thank you for your answer. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. And Ellie would like to also follow up.
Yes, a couple points. Firstly, we are absolutely concerned about off-site mitigation. That's why we are so regularly engaged in communications and engagement with the Pueblo del San Ildefonso. And it's because that is approaching that border, right? So we are very concerned and we have regular conversations. But you said something that I feel it's important to address. And, you know, it's easy to see us as the federal government. It's easy to see us as Washington, D.C. or some sort of... I live in White Rock. My son plays outside. He drinks the water. He eats the dirt because he's 6 and 6-year-olds eat dirt. You know, I'm going to go ahead and speak on behalf of the state for this one too. I think part of the reason that you see such passion and such line forming and you see this kind of conflict is because we're so passionate, and it's because we live here too. And we are directly impacted as citizens and as members of the community as well. So I just share because, you know, this is very important to us. It's not just from a programmatic perspective, it's a personal perspective. Our families live here too. We are members of this community.
Madam Chair, Sarita, I appreciate your sincere, and because, you know, we're all in the same boat here. Well, not a boat, but we drink that water, right? And familia es familia, whether you're in Los Alamos, we're in Truchas, it doesn't matter. This is our home. And so I get it, and I appreciate that. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent questions and comments, and thank you to Caitlin and Ellie for your heartfelt and I don't know how else to say it, heartfelt comments. Okay. Any other members with questions or comments to Caitlin and Ellie before we move on? Anybody online? Okay, seeing none. Well, thank you both. Appreciate it and appreciate you both being here and willing to take our questions and willing to engage. We all have different parts to play, and that's why we all come together so that we can have that discussion. So we work together toward these solutions for our community. So thank you. So we're going to shift, and we are going to do the update and look ahead from N3B with, that's a lot of B's, N3B from Brad and Brett.
The B's are present. Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. Brad Smith, President General Manager from N3B, and this is about a year now, so I just wanted to say it is impressive, and I like what Joseph said, familia, and you're going to hear something here on my update that brings that home. First off, Elena, thank you for your 6 years very much. You've been very forthcoming and helpful to me. Patricio, welcome. And Manny, welcome to you, so congratulations. And the CAB is very important. Everywhere I've been, the more vibrant the CAB's been, usually the better outcomes and dialogues we have. So as everybody said, how we do this matters, being respectful matters, and we can agree to disagree at times, but still, we all live in this area, and it is important. So I want to date myself a little bit here, and I'm going to talk about Hollywood Squares. I've got a couple folks up there, Eric Everett, and we have Kristen Henderson, who's Eric, people know from being on the Twig, and Kristen is my external stakeholders person, and in the room I have Deb Kerrigan, and I want to welcome Brett Griebenow. I did some work for Brett at the Pueblo Chem DeMille plant up in Pueblo, Colorado, so he's returning the favor to me. It's a quid pro quo. No good deed goes unpunished. But one of the things I also offered up when I took over as president is if we have opportunities to share my leadership team here, we want to do that, because the more transparent we are, the more questions you can ask and the better outcomes, again, we can get to. Brett has been a project manager for large government contracts, DOD and Department of Energy, and I'm blessed to have him here, and he's going to talk a little bit about mission excellence. Some of the things we are doing to try to move the needle is really how to become better at what we do and having more reliable mission execution. Michael Michelanis heading off to the sunset. Wish him well. He's going to have a tough job, and I appreciate the partnership he's given to me during our tenure together. But Ellie has been very helpful as well, so I look forward to working with her and whoever the successor is, Ellie or anyone else. Because as we go, just like NMED, we all have a part to play. So the first thing I wanted to cover, last week, myself and 9 others of my leadership team and workforce attended what's called the Waste Management Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. It happens every year, except for COVID, and those that'll remember that they came back and actually had COVID and had to go into isolation. I thought that was unfortunate, but shows the importance of how we interact with those around us. But there were 3,300 people at this. Now, there are people from the Department of Energy. There are people from International Atomic Energy Agency. There are people from other DOE sites, so it's a lessons learned opportunity. We have regulators. There are students. We have institutions from all over the country and really the world. There were folks that were presenting papers and poster sessions that were from the UK, and they were from Asia and other places. So it's really interesting to see that the resources and how we do what we do in the cleanup area is worldwide. Climate change, all that matters. So anytime we can go and have a discussion with somebody or take in a panel, learn from that is something we want to incorporate here. And vice versa, they can learn from what we're doing. We did highlight Los Alamos cleanup project progress, but the other thing we were really doing is how do we get early career folks interested in the cleanup? Because as we've said, northern New Mexico is unique. Some can be intimidated because if they don't speak Spanish or they don't do other things, but if they're curious and are willing to learn, we have something that we can then benefit from. But more importantly, how do I engage the local populace in New Mexico to come up and help with this mission? We talk about it being a village. It is. I'm going to talk a little bit about scholarship winners. They're all from disadvantaged families in northern New Mexico, pueblos. Their stories are very powerful, but it goes to show if you don't know what the opportunity is, you don't know the opportunity you might want to pursue. So we had 4 panels that we participated on, and then we had a whole bunch of folks that were going around. I'm not going to complain because Michael Michelanis did 5 panels and I did a measly 3, but one of mine counts as 2 because it was 3.5 hours. Don't tell him I said that.
I won't.
I know this isn't being recorded or anything.
Okay. It's only on YouTube.
I know, it's just, but we're not going viral, I promise. Oh, good. No, so one panel regarded the LANL overview, including cleanup progress. We had a WIP panel. My executive officer, Jeff Stevens, participated on that, including the role of LANL in shipping our waste and the progress we're making. We had a contractors presidents panel, which was really interesting to have 14 of us up on a stage, and somebody teasingly said it was the Last Supper panel because it was so light. But again, we were able to impart and share not only what we're doing from a mission delivery standpoint, but leadership development, career development, and how we're bringing the next generation workforce in, and how we're dealing with different regulatory issues and learning from that, because we do know the regulators are engaged with each other. The other thing we did is we talked about standing up our Mission Excellence Program, and so Brett will go into that a little bit more here, and I want to leave him enough time to do it because it is good. But the last thing that we've been talking about is safety culture improvement. Back to the familia. Unless I grow a positive work environment, unless I make people feel safe to come to work, the cultural aspects of this is they bring, whether it's the Pueblo or the tribal mindset, which we need, you need others that can bring the diversity. So everybody looks at what I'll call, race, religion, et cetera. To me, diversity is diversity of thought. The 6 inches between our ears, everybody can bring something to bear with what we do. Every Monday we have a new hire and orientation for the most part. Every other week we don't, but I really, really stress the importance of, if you see something, say something. They have to know that this is a place that if you see something, because we live in this area, every day we don't do something right, you affect yourself. You impact your family, you potentially impact future generations. So as we all said, whether it's the land, the water, the air, we are all interconnected. And we have to make sure that what we do reflects that and be respectful of that. So if I take care of the workers and they come here, well, what do? Then they go home, and whether they're on feast days or they're just sitting in their churches or they're sitting in whatever their social setting is, they carry out conversations and they actually do discuss what's going on. And anybody thinks that just like this, social media is real, but the thing that has always been here is the storytelling of the Southwest and the oral history. Everybody thinks in terms of what we do from the standpoint of what we write. The richness of the Southwest and other places, but particularly here, we have a very rich oral history. The storytelling, the understanding what, the forefathers did, and to bring that to bear today so you know that whatever you believe at the end of the day is impacting you. We become that storyteller, the story that they're going to talk about later. And I think that having that richness and that diversity helps us. So one of the things that we did also that happens every year, but it's really cool. For those that did not remember Danny Nichols, he was the initial contact handle True Waste program manager who, God rest his soul, passed away. And we had Dennis Huddleston, who was one of our T2S brothers who also passed. But in their name, we give out scholarships every year. And part of this is not only investing in the next generation, but reading and understanding what we can do to help those that might not have those opportunities. Each student gets $9,000. And the other upside is I get to go talk to them about potentially coming to work for me at N3B. Our 2024 winners are very interesting. Jade Madrid is currently at Northern New Mexico College. She's a biology major and one of the Pueblo members, and she said part of what she wants to do is to be able to help her family understand. She's the first generation to go to college out of her entire family. So again, she's trying to impart to her siblings what and why she wants to do and come into environmental cleanup. Amber Faree is a professional health major at University of New Mexico, Los Alamos. What makes her interesting is she started out in a totally different career and then circle back around wanting to go into health and occupational medicine because, again, you listen to the people here who have been impacted, and if you have that sensitivity and you have the mindset you want to help, healthcare is a way to do it that isn't necessarily that first thing that comes to mind when we're out doing groundwater remediation or anything else. Lastly, Felicia Rodriguez, she's also at Northern New Mexico College. She's in applied science and radiation protection. A mother of 5, father healthcare for 12 years, and went back to school to get her degree. So you listen to this, and she had the same kind of mindset of what they can do. Well, the next piece is, okay, that's this year. Now I start adding, we're at the Santa Fe Indian School, we're starting to talk to them about how we can bring on interns. But instead of getting them just there, it's how do I get into high school? Because it's not just STEM. The other pieces we're looking for is how do I get environmental samplers? How do I get apprentices who might want to be an electrician or they might want to go into hazmat or something else that they may not know exists. So there's mentoring opportunities that we are going to take on that, to me, is exciting because, again, the legacy I leave behind is going to be who takes the next step, who comes in behind us and continues this mission. So looking ahead to the next quarter, we're mobilizing crews right now to go out to Chiquewee, so that'll get moving. And we're also in Lower Pajarito. We're continuing our investigation remediation at Starmer, Upper Pajarito, and 2 Mile Canyon. Caitlin talked a little bit about R76, and I appreciate, again, this is back to what people may have done before and what they accepted as, let's say, the governance model or how we develop or how we interact. Doesn't mean you can't have misunderstandings, and if you can partner together to get the right outcome, it's best for everybody because now we can start having a template for drilling work plans and other things that makes it easier in the expectation on how we're sitting there. But the only way that happens is to sit down, be respectful, and understand. So I appreciate that. Thank you. We're continuing progress on our corrugated metal pipes. We're resuming drill and drain operations. Those were suspended for a little while. We were short crew members, and we have now requalified them, so they will be going back in to do that. One of the really cool things that we are doing is we are piloting, this has been a technology that was over in the UK, but it's called Universal Drum Assay and Segregation System. And it is a much more refined counting mechanism to really understand what is true waste and what's low-level waste, because WIP is a national resource, and what goes in there matters. And if I don't overload WIP with waste that should not be dispositioned there, I can send it to other licensed facilities. And again, it allows me to reduce the source term and the risk up on the hill and get it into a safe place because now we've remediated that, packaged it, and got it off the mesa. So that is a real important pilot program. We started counting yesterday, was the initial count. So as we make progress on that, I'll report that in subsequent CAB meetings. And of course, we talked about true waste shipments as being a priority, as they always are. The next Environmental Management Cleanup Forum is April 18th at the Sala Event Center in Los Alamos, down the road from Fuller Lodge. It's the unpaid, I'm just throwing that out there for everybody so that they come. And the focus is going to be waste disposition with updates by Ellie. Woohoo!
I know, it's exciting.
So Brett will be the next up. We can save questions until the end, so I give him the appropriate amount of time. So Brett?
Thanks, Brad. So I'm Brett Grebino. We're standing up a new mission excellence organization, as Brad just talked about. And before I go through what we're trying to do with that organization, Brad asked me to share a little bit of my background just to introduce myself to the CAB. I've been doing this work for about 37 years now for DOE and the Department of Defense. Joined N3B just over a year ago when Brad called me up. He told you he supported me up at the Pueblo Chemical Agent Destruction Pilot Plant in Pueblo, Colorado. When I was the program manager there, I was driving some culture change. Asked Brad to come out and help me reinforce that culture change in the field. So he called himself my free-range chicken, because he'd go off and solve an issue, come back, tell me what happened, go solve the next issue, come back. So a little over a year ago, he called me up and said, Brett, payback time, I need a free-range chicken. Come out. So I am now, or have been, Brad's free-range chicken. He asked me to come out and drive some culture change initiatives that we had here focused on safety, that safety-conscious work environment that he talked about, and then some strengthening the partnering relationship that we had with EMLA to make sure we were working as a group coming up with the best solution we can. And the main reason that Brad asked me to come here is because of that previous experience at Pueblo Chemical Agent Destruction Pilot Plant up in Pueblo, Colorado, where I drove similar culture change. So that plant was designed to and constructed to safely destroy 780,000 chemical munitions and specifically mustard munitions that were stored at the Pueblo Chemical Depot. So for any of you that don't know, mustard was developed in World War I and World War II as a blistering agent. That means it was specifically designed to incapacitate soldiers by blistering their lungs. And I joined that team there as deputy project manager when they were finishing construction, getting ready for plant operations, introducing agent into the plant. And as part of that, I drove culture change, getting the team ready for that introduction of agent, the hazards that we were going to have. So like N3B, we had a schedule that we had to meet, and that schedule was driven by an international treaty that the United States had signed to destroy all chemical weapons in the arsenal for the United States, just like our schedule here at N3B is as driven by the consent order that DOE signed with the state of New Mexico. So that schedule meant we had to destroy more than 700 munitions per day. So as you can imagine, handling hundreds of these munitions a day, disassembling them so we could gain access to the mustard inside, and then neutralizing that mustard through a chemical neutralization process. Very high hazard, high consequence activity, and effectively executing disciplined operations was critical, very much like it is here at N3B with our nuclear waste. So with that background on me, let me shift to talking about what we're trying to do with this new Mission Excellence organization. I'm sure you've heard over the past year Brad talk about his focus on driving operations excellence at N3B, making sure that we are doing work correctly the first time, every time. And this organization, Mission Excellence, is a key element of Brad's vision. So the way I think of it in Mission Excellence, we have an execution piece of the organization and a people piece. On the execution side, we want to elevate our maintenance and work control to an N3B level. Instead of right now, we have a maintenance organization in CH True and one on the environmental remediation program. We want to bring those to be unified as one N3B and implement N3B levels, programs, and procedures consistently across the entire project. And by doing that, we'll be able to optimize our maintenance team's ability to support the mission priorities that we have at N3B, which means we're doing some cross-training of our maintenance personnel in the CH True program and the ER program to be able to work in both areas. We're also going to have a dedicated focus on disciplined operations with an organization dedicated to implementing conduct of operations best practices from across the DOE complex and reinforcing the disciplined operations in the field through coaching and mentoring. So our highest priority, I know you've heard this many times, is to ensure that everybody goes home in the same condition they came to work. So the disciplined operations, and I break that down into 4 elements. So it's personal accountability, procedural compliance, questioning attitude, and willingness to stop. So somebody having the personal courage, if something doesn't look right, to say, stop, pause, please, we need to make sure we get this right. So that disciplined operation is the foundation to ensure that we live to our safety first, safety always priority. Then on the people side, we're going to increase our focus on N3B's people strategy and making N3B a great place to work. So in my experience, project performance is largely driven by how we treat our people. And Brad and Jeff have determined that we need more focus in that area. So we're going to implement leadership development training to enhance our leaders' capability and knowledge for leading their teams. And this is really an investment that Brad's making in our people. We're working to implement a program called IDEAS, which stands for individuals developing effective alternative solutions. So that's really a way to get our workforce to identify their ideas for how we make N3B a better place to work, a safer place to work, and then acting on that input we get from the workforce. And we're continuing to strengthen our relationship with EMLA. So as Brad often tells our team, how we do work is as important as what we do. And so this organization is really focused on improving how we do our work. So I think all of these changes brought together are going to help N3B make a step improvement in our performance. So I want to close with why we're doing this now. And I think Brad has probably talked to you about over the past year, we've been working to strengthen our safety management programs to ensure we have a solid foundation for the way we work and maintain the safety of our workforce. And as a result of that effort that's coming to a conclusion now, we're in the process of rolling out some new work control and maintenance procedures that are going to start driving that consistent implementation across the project. So now is a good time to raise these organizations to the N3B level. And the stop works that you've heard about over the past year, 2 years, have largely related to disciplined operations or lack of disciplined operations. So we just simply have to increase our focus in this area and have the right dedicated resources to reinforcing disciplined operations in the field. And finally, on the people side, when Brad and Jeff came into their positions, they identified this gap in our workforce and leadership development and wanted to increase our emphasis on N3B's people strategy. So as they came into their leadership positions, they brought all of this together and asked us to stand up this mission excellence organization. So it's all coming together right now. It's the ideal time to make that change. So with that, we'll open it up to any questions you have for either Brad or I.
Anybody, any members online who have any questions or comments for Brett or Brad? Well, you got off easy. Oh. No, you didn't.
So close.
Joseph, please.
Madam Chair, that's some good stuff. Just that the diversity of thought, that's pretty cool. That is really cool just to hear that. And the storytelling and the oral history, it's refreshing because it needs to be done. Los Alamos has that diversity there from northern New Mexico. And continue to stay focused and stand firm and be in ready state, I would say, because we need to be ready, right? The workforce is the foundation, the rock of N3B, bottom line. When I was at FEMA, when I was talking to the FEMA administrator and the deputy administrator about that, about the issues of leadership skills, leadership qualities, and so on and so on, we were doing exactly the same thing that you guys are talking about, but right there at that time when we were talking, we were putting it to work and making it work. So muchas gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Patricio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just got one quick question. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brett, for the interesting topic there. And thank you guys for all the work that you do for our community. Just on the scholarship aspect, that's a really good opportunity for our children and for people around here in our community. Just curious, where does that $9,000 scholarship go towards? Is it specifically for the environmental cleanup program, or can students choose that scholarship to go towards any major they choose?
It's for them. It's hands off, thank you, congratulations. It was very, very robust competition this year. And in fact, I'm taking with my ESH&Q program manager, Robert Edwards, we are taking one of the award winners and her husband out to Gabriel's on Saturday at 4 p.m. if anybody wants to see. But it's back to, we have to keep this moving. And so once, it's like priming a pump. Once they realize this is a potential, and that's why to me mentoring takes the next step. Because if we can start getting people, I know LANL does mentoring, I think N3B missed a step. We missed an opportunity. And quite frankly, I don't care where they go to work as long as they see the opportunity and develop themselves and see a better future. So if I can get there, then I feel better. Like I said, everywhere I've been, that's been an emphasis because most places, it's great if you're LANL and a PhD or, you have a profession. Sometimes you don't get or you don't see the opportunity. And so those that work themselves up, Manny, we've talked about this. I started as an electrician. So once you might have aspirations, but if you don't have somebody helping you along the way, you're not going to get there. So we want to allow that opportunity. And the other thing is, it's not just the Accord Pueblos, it's the 19 Pueblos here or communities that if there's an ask, just call me. I mean, we have people who really want to help. And it's no different than, I want somebody to treat my granddaughter this way, right? So it's back to being respectful in what we leave behind. And if they choose to take this on, that's great. If they don't, that's fine too. It's finding their own path. If they want to go and work for NNMCAB or another regulator, I'm serious. I mean, no, so again, everybody looks like, well, why would you do that? Back to the richness of, if you understand the regulations, one of the things we have really emphasized since I've been here is the contract requirements, because in there are the flow down of not just the regulations. There are DOE orders, there are EPA guidelines. There's all kinds of things in there that if I teach somebody to use their procedures properly, then they're by definition going to follow the requirements. It's getting them to believe that. Training qualification matters. It's not that I'm coming in with a certain amount of knowledge, because anywhere you go, unless you listen to those that have been here, just because you don't have a degree doesn't mean you're not smart. And we oftentimes mistake people when they come in of not having experience. It's like, no, you have life experience, and I can use that. And it drives me crazy when I hear somebody say, well, that's not how we do it here. Really? Just let me know that. I wear jeans and boots a lot. I'm out in the field a lot. And one of the things, I have people who have worked for me at other sites here, and I don't want them tattling, quote unquote, but I do want to know if somebody is going against what we're trying to do, because it matters. Because at the end of the day, if I am with NMED or if I'm with somebody in the Department of Energy or somewhere else, the story needs to be the story. I don't want to contrive something, and I don't want a worker to feel like they have to make something up. The truth's the truth. I may not like what I'm hearing, but it's still information and it gives me something to act on. And that's why my leadership team does that as well.
Madam Chair, may I? Thank you, Brad. It's good to hear, because a lot of our students here need both on the field and education experience, which a lot of them are lacking, and I'm glad you guys are providing that opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any more members who would like to? FYI, my undergraduate is in philosophy.
We can use it. Come on over.
Okay. Thank goodness for the Department of Physics at New Mexico State University. Diversity of opinion and experience. Okay, so it is 3 p.m. We are ahead of schedule. Let's take a break and return at 3:15. Thank you all. If we could all return and get seated and prepare for a talk on groundwater monitoring at LANL by David Fellenz. So come on down and we'll get started.
All right, excellent. Thank you. First of all, I just want to say how happy I am to be here today. I'm very honored to be able to give this presentation to the CAB. I really hope that this sparks some great discussion afterwards. I'm not sure how you typically work this. I'm guessing you'll go through the presentation and then have questions following. But if there are things that come up during the talk, I'm willing to entertain those as well. Just a background. So my name is Dave Fellenz. I am with the groundwater monitoring team at N3B. I've been with N3B for almost 6 years now. I began with them in May of 2018, right after the contract. I've been doing work up here in the environmental sector since 2010. Started out as a field sampler for 5 years with the groundwater program, and then spent a few years after that actually with the New Mexico Environment Department at the DOE Oversight Bureau in Los Alamos, and then transitioned to N3B. So what I'm going to be talking about today is an overview of our groundwater program. So just to provide some background, the laboratory, as I'm sure everyone is aware, was established as part of World War II in 1943. It was developed mainly for the testing and research of nuclear weapons. Beginning in 1943 to the present, there are not only those nuclear aspirations, but diverse operations that have had various impacts to the environment. We've already discussed some of those here today. Beginning in 1945, the earliest groundwater monitoring studies were conducted by the USGS. That was really a feasibility assessment to find out how much water was available for the growing community of Los Alamos. 1945 being the time when it was determined that Los Alamos was going to stay around as a permanent community. From that point on up to the mid-1990s, there were hundreds of wells that were drilled across the Pajarito Plateau. So in that time, we were talking about supply wells for drinking water, test wells, observation wells, monitoring wells. And beginning in 1997, when we had this conglomerate of wells, it was determined that we really needed to kind of rein everything in, and we implemented a hydrologic characterization program to identify which wells were important, which wells no longer important, and also where there were gaps, and we wanted to start installing new monitoring locations, which brings us to the present. So today we have a network of 203 monitoring locations that are across the 40 square mile campus of LANL. Each of these locations is sampled at least annually, with sampling conducted more frequently at additional locations, which we'll talk about here shortly. So the groundwater monitoring program is actually fulfilled Section 12 of the Compliance Order on Consent, or the Consent Order, and it is Appendix B, Milestone 1. So the Interim Facility-Wide Groundwater Monitoring Plan, or the IFGIMP, is our sampling plan for monitoring groundwater at Los Alamos. This plan is updated annually, and it runs from October 1st through September 30th, so it follows the federal fiscal year. We just had our recent discussions with NMED. We're already looking forward to monitoring year 2025 and how we can improve the plan. Really, the whole point of this plan is it's a living document. We want to make sure that we're focusing our attention on the pertinent wells, the pertinent contaminants of concern, and making sure that those are receiving the top priority. So just to discuss what the monitoring plan goes over, it provides the monitoring locations. It also establishes the sampling frequency of those locations. It establishes the analytical suites that we sample for. It also provides a sampling schedule of when we're going to sample those locations throughout the year, and it details the reporting requirements. When we do sample a site, all of that data ends up in a report that goes to NMED. It is also publicly available in Intellis NM, and hopefully you've had some kind of presentation or understanding of Intellis. It's a very powerful website where all of our data is hosted. As we go through the presentation, I'm going to have a couple of slides or pictures interspersed with the slides. So this picture here is of our annual float trip down the Rio Grande. We sample a number of springs in White Rock Canyon. I'll talk a little bit more about springs in a moment, but springs are considered the surface expression of our regional aquifer in this case. And this is really where our regional aquifer enters into the environment, or White Rock Canyon. So we do this trip annually. We sample for a number of constituents along the Rio Grande. We are joined with our colleagues from NMED on this trip. And it's really a great opportunity to understand if there are any potential contaminants moving into the environment that could affect communities further along downstream. So the real purpose of the IFGIMP is these 4 bullet points here. And I don't like to read from a slide, but I'll kind of read what the purpose is. So it's to determine the fate and transport of known legacy waste contaminants. It's also to detect the arrival of potential legacy contaminants in groundwater from previous releases. As I just mentioned, with our White Rock trip, that is one of the things we're looking for on that particular trip. It's also to evaluate the efficacies of corrective action remedies, such as the IM, and it's to support corrective measures. So for those of you who are interested, if you've never read this document, it is available for public download. I have the web address there. If you want to go ahead and write that down. I'm perhaps biased, as I'm the one that updates it every year, but I think it's a very well organized document. It does a great job of explaining the locations where we sample, why we're sampling, and the frequency at which we're sampling, and really does lay the framework for the groundwater monitoring program. I'll go ahead and just give a little information about this photo that we see here. This is some of our samplers in the field actually collecting a sample at one of our wells. This particular well is regional well R50. For those of you who have been around a while, you may realize R50 is the boundary well right on the boundary of Pueblo de San Ildefonso and the Mortandad Canyon. Very important well that we sample quite frequently. So this map, hopefully you can all see that. I'm going to be pointing out a few things on here, but these are the locations of where we are focusing our monitoring. So the IFGIMP is set up so that we focus our sampling on particular monitoring groups. And this next slide, I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit. This next slide shows you what our monitoring groups are and the reasons we sample at those particular locations. So on the left is the monitoring groups. There are 8 of them in total. The first one up there is the TA16260 outfall. So this particular monitoring group is in the area where there was high explosives machining, and subsequently we now have a plume of RDX in that area. So on the right-hand column we have what our analytes of concern are based on those monitoring groups. So in TA16260, we're particularly interested in looking at RDX and other high explosives compounds, as well as a few of the volatile organic compounds that might be associated with some of that work as well. To go back and show you on the map, that is this large area here that is in the southwestern portion of the laboratory. The next monitoring group of interest is associated with TA21. TA21 is an area where there is historic plutonium processing as well as weapons production. So again, the analytes of concern that have been identified with that particular monitoring group are tritium, nitrate, and perchlorate. To put that in a spatial perspective, the TA21 monitoring group is our northernmost monitoring group. It encompasses Los Alamos and Pueblo canyons. The next monitoring group we focus on is TA54. TA54, of course, is a waste storage and disposal area. So the contaminants of concern there are volatile organic compound, TCE, as well as the potential for tritium. And for folks that want to see where that is, it's right here. That is in Pajarito Canyon. Chromium Investigation Group. I'm sure you all have quite a bit of familiarity with the Chromium Investigation Group. But again, we're monitoring the hexavalent chromium plume in that particular area. There's also some other analytes of concern that are monitored: chlorate, sulfate, nitrate, and tritium. And again, just to put that in perspective to all of our other groups, chromium is right here, kind of in the center of the laboratory in Sandia and Mortandad canyons. Lastly, we have a couple of smaller groups here, MDA-AB and MDA-C. Those are material disposal areas. That's what that acronym stands for. And both of those are focused on slightly different things. So MDA-AB was an area where there was underground hydronuclear testing in the early 1960s. Main contaminants of concern there are really radionuclides as well as some metals. And MDAC, which we already heard talked about earlier today, again, that's an inactive landfill, mainly concerned about VOCs there as well as tritium. Again, just to put that on the map, MDAC, here's this small little area just to the south of the Chromium Monitoring Group, and MDAB here is really our southern and easternmost monitoring group. And lastly, we have a general surveillance monitoring group. General surveillance really encompasses all of the sampling locations that don't have any association with the specific monitoring groups mentioned before. A lot of the locations that are part of the general surveillance monitoring group are actually considered background locations, because while we have areas of concern with contamination, we also want to understand the groundwater background levels. So many of those wells are found in the general surveillance group. And as you can see, these are really watershed specific and all across the LANL campus. So there are several water occurrences. We already had a question earlier about the regional aquifer. So I want to kind of run through the four major water occurrences that are sampled as part of the groundwater monitoring group. So first of all, we have base flows. Base flows are considered persistent surface water that's maintained by precipitation, effluent, or other sources. This is separate from stormwater. Stormwater is runoff that is associated with storms, as opposed to these where this is water that runs continuously throughout the year. Secondly, we have alluvial groundwater. The alluvial groundwater is water within the alluvium, so it's a very shallow zone, typically found in canyon bottoms. The alluvium is anywhere from a few feet thick to about 100 feet thick, depending on where you are within LANL. And the water in those is often very ephemeral. Depending on if we've had a wet winter or if we have a good monsoon season, the alluvium can actually dry up. So that might not be persistently wet throughout the year. The perched intermediate groundwater is the next lowest zone. Perched intermediate groundwater represents localized zones of saturation within the unsaturated or the vadose zone. Often these perched zones are found in areas where there's an aquitard that precludes them, and they stretch out laterally within the vadose zone. They are not continuous. They are they form very small pockets in different parts of the laboratory. So when we do encounter this perched intermediate groundwater, if it's available in a quantity that merits sampling, we'll often complete a well there to get an understanding of what's happening in those higher zones. And lastly, we have our regional groundwater. The regional groundwater is considered to be the deep, laterally continuous groundwater beneath the Pajarito Plateau. Typically under LANL, the groundwater in the regional zone is anywhere, depending on if you're on top of a canyon or in a canyon bottom, anywhere from about 1,200 to 900 feet below ground surface. This is also the groundwater which the town of Los Alamos, as well as other communities, get their groundwater, drinking water from. So it's a very important source, and the majority of our wells are completed within the regional groundwater, as we want to have a very good understanding of that source of drinking water for those communities and making sure that they are staying clean. And if there are contaminants of concern, we want to understand how they're moving through that particular system. So I do have one note on the bottom here. I did mention springs. Springs are not necessarily considered a separate entity. As I mentioned, springs are actually considered the surface expression of groundwater. And the sources of springs can be from any of the three listed there: alluvial, perched, intermediate, or regional. The majority of the springs we sample, however, have their source as the regional groundwater. This is a breakdown of the number of groundwater sites by location. So first of all, base flow sites, again, that's the persistent surface water flow. We have 14 sites that are sampled under the IFGIMP. Springs, I've kind of mentioned that separately, even though springs are part of the alluvial, perched, and regional groundwater wells. Springs are broken out separately here. There's those 30 locations that we sample that are considered springs. We have 20 alluvial wells that we sample, 41 perched intermediate wells, and 98 regional aquifers. And again, if my math is correct, that should add up to 203. I don't know if anybody's doing that on the fly. You can check my arithmetic. But again, as you can see, the vast majority of those wells are completed in the regional. So we also do a number of off-site monitoring that's not part of the IFGIMP. The off-site monitoring is of the production wells or the supply wells where communities get their drinking water from. So we sample Los Alamos County and the City of Santa Fe water supply wells. We also sample supply wells on the Pueblo de San Ildefonso, as well as a number of domestic wells and springs that are on the Pueblo. So I think I've broken it down here. So select wells in Los Alamos County, especially ones that are close to that chromium plume, are sampled monthly. And we're looking for primarily chromium, but also metals that could be associated with the potential arrival of chromium and other anions, such as sulfate, that could be potentially associated with the arrival of chromium. All other wells in Los Alamos County are at least sampled annually. There's wells in the Guaje well field, if folks are familiar with that. Those are sampled annually as they are quite a ways from any of the influence of the lab, but we do want to make sure that we're sampling every well that the community gets their drinking water from at least annually. Additionally to that, we have wells in the Buckman well field that are on the other side of the Rio Grande that are sampled twice a year. So those wells are sampled for general characterization as well as specific constituents of interest that could have been released from the laboratory. Primarily, where they're located, we're looking for high explosives compounds that might end up in those locations. To date, I just want to let everyone know, in all of the Los Alamos County wells, as well as the Buckman wells, and the wells that are on Pueblo de San Ildefonso, we have not had any chromium above background or any other potential laboratory constituents that are above a screening level of any sort. So we continue to monitor those regularly. We want to make sure that that program stays intact. And that, very similarly to the IFGIMP, is updated annually as well with input from the interested parties, so Los Alamos County, City of Santa Fe, and the Pueblo de San Ildefonso. So this flow chart here gives us a background on our screening level criteria. So for groundwater screening, we look for a number of constituents, and those constituents that we are sampling for are in the New Mexico Administrative Code, Part 20.6.2. So within 20.6.2, there are two separate lists of constituents that we look for. There's the list of toxic pollutants, and there's also a human health standard that's listed in 20.6.2.3103. So this flow chart is broken down into how we establish those screening levels. So I'm going to start with 20.6.2.3103. It's a mouthful there. So there are 61 compounds listed in there, and they actually have associated screening levels with them. So when we are sampling our groundwater, we are comparing our results to the screening levels that are actually listed in the New Mexico Administrative Code for those particular compounds. The rest that are considered toxic pollutants don't actually have screening levels associated with them in the New Mexico Administrative Code. Rather, we then use this multi-tiered approach to establish our screening levels for those. This also is associated with the consent order. The consent order talks about this approach to establishing contaminant levels. But to work down the flow chart here, so when we're looking at our toxic pollutants, we first look at EPA MCLs, or maximum contaminant levels. We see what's listed in there. If there is not an established EPA MCL, we then flow down to the NMED soil screening levels, particularly Table A1, which lists a tap water, cancer, and non-cancer screening level for compounds. Again, if there's no screening level listed in there, we then flow down, lastly, to the EPA regional screening levels to look for the appropriate screening level. It should be noted, however, that if a lower tier level has a lower screening level than a higher tier level, we will use the lower tier level. Whatever is the most stringent screening level, that is what we are screening our contaminants to. So I know there's been some questions. I actually didn't even necessarily realize this until I started working in the groundwater sector of how this was broken down. And once this chart was put together, I think it really does a great job of explaining how we're actually able to screen to our groundwater standards. So again, we have a number of monitoring objectives. for our groundwater program. So one of them is to identify concentration trends. This is very important in areas like the chromium monitoring group. We want to make sure that when our interim measures program is running, and when it's not running, we have an understanding of what the concentrations of chromium are doing at those locations. So there are a number of wells throughout the chromium monitoring group, for instance, that are sampled monthly. That way we can understand month after month, year after year, what the trends are showing us, and potentially where we might need to be putting new wells, or what we might need to be doing to really kind of tweak our monitoring program. We also want to determine long-term monitoring needs. So that goes somewhat with what I just said, but in a lot of cases, if there are locations where we might have, seemingly a gap, the data that we have can maybe help identify where a well would be beneficial. So we can look at those data and cite new locations to where we think we might want to have additional monitoring for long-term trends analysis. We can also use our monitoring program to evaluate representative conditions. This is very important, as a number of our wells are starting to reach 20 to 25 years, 30 years in some cases. The wells only have a finite lifespan, so by being able to look at the geochemistry that we collect from these wells, we can determine what the health of these wells are, and then start determining whether or not they'll need to be replaced potentially in the future, or if there's a way that we can continue to service their lifespan, but it might not be necessarily in the ways that we would normally sample them. So when I say that, our wells right now are sampled in a way that's prescribed by the Environmental Protection Agency. We sample our wells by purging a finite volume, looking for stable conditions, and then collecting our samples. In wells where they're showing conditions that might not be representative of the groundwater, in consultation with NMED, we have a list actually within the IFGIMP, it's in Appendix E if anyone cares to look for it, where we've identified wells that we need to either sample with more volume purged from them, or less volume purged, in fact, in some cases, in order to get a representative sample. So we're using that data kind of in real time to be able to make these decisions when we come together with NMED on an annual basis. We also want to understand potential contaminant sources. This is very important, especially as new contaminants emerge. In a moment, I'm going to be talking about PFAS. We've been looking at our data from PFAS to help establish contaminant sources where we might be seeing these move into the environment. And lastly, we just want to be able to also assess the nature and extent of emerging contaminants. So all these things together are really the reason why we're running this sampling program. And again, a lot of this is prescribed from the consent order as well, but the IFGIMP just does a very nice, concise job of laying out why we're sampling and where we're sampling. We'll talk about this photo here. This is a typical sampling setup. Again, this is at R50. For folks that have been out there, you might recognize this location. But when we go out and sample a regional well, since the regional wells are so deep, we have to use pumps that are electronically driven. And many of these locations are quite remote, so we'll actually bring a generator out to the site, hook the generator up to an electrical panel, and pump the well that way. And just so folks are also aware, in the background here are the tanks where we containerize the water. So as we're actively purging the water's being containerized. And then based on the information we get back, we can make a determination of whether that water is available to be applied back into the environment, or if there's constituents that exceed one of the screening levels that I talked about earlier, the water then needs to be shipped off-site for additional disposal. So I'll go ahead now and talk about some of our emerging contaminants. So one of the emerging contaminants that we have been looking for at LANL is PFAS. So PFAS, for folks that may not be aware, stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a class of 15,000 anthropogenically created substances. None of these are actually, I should say, well, none of them really are naturally occurring in nature. There are fluorinated substances, but they're not like the PFAS that we're seeing. So PFAS were first developed in the 1930s, and they're actually first used as part of the Manhattan Project. PFAS were used to coat pipes, to prevent corrosion during the uranium processing production. During the 1950s, it became declassified. These were originally classified for use in the Manhattan Project. And industry started realizing that this whole class of products could be used for a number of different applications. So some of the applications that PFAS are used for include nonstick coatings, grease-proof food contact paper, waterproof fabrics. You can read them here. Lastly, we have firefighting foam, aqueous film-forming foam, or AFFF. I'm going to use this. This is a picture here of AFFF. This is not actually from LANL, but AFFF was a very effective foam for putting out fires. Unfortunately, it's also become one of the #1 sources for PFAS in the environment. So in terms of regulations in New Mexico, beginning in 2018, PFAS, 3 compounds, were added to the toxic pollutants list in the New Mexico Administrative Code. So those 3 are perfluorohexane sulfonic acid, perfluorooctane sulfonate, and perfluorooctanoic acid, PFHXS, PFOS, and PFOA. Initially, the screening levels for these were set to 70 nanograms per liter for a cumulative limit, so all 3 of those combined. That has since been updated as of June of 2022. Screening levels are now for individual compounds. So 400 nanograms per liter for PFHXS and 60 nanograms per liter for PFOA and PFOS. Just to put that in perspective, we talk about nanograms per liter. 1 nanogram per liter is equivalent to 1 second in 31,688 years. So we're talking about extremely small amounts of this compound that can have very profound effects on human health and health in the environment. So these 2 charts here show what we've done to date in terms of sampling at LANL. When PFAS became added to the toxic pollutants list in 2018, we then added it to our monitoring year 2022 or 2020 sampling. So sampling for PFAS began in October of 2019. It was determined that we were going to look for PFAS at all 203 sampling locations across the board, alluvial, intermediate, regional, base flows. We really wanted to understand PFAS in the environment at LANL. So as of right now, 185 total locations have been sampled. You might notice that it's less than 203. The reason why all 203 locations have not been sampled is some locations we have not been able to sample. Those would be locations such as a base flow that doesn't have water running through it, or an alluvial well that is dry. But if a location has had water in it when we've gone out to sample it, we have sampled it multiple times at this point for PFAS. The chart on the right breaks down our PFAS detects by our water type. So, I'm hitting the wrong button here again. So our regionals make up more than half of all of the wells that we sample at LANL. To date, we found PFAS detects in our regional aquifer at just a little over a quarter of those locations. The thing to notice, though, are locations that are much closer to the surface, such as our alluvial wells. 14 alluvial wells have been sampled. 14 alluvial wells have had PFAS detects. Our perched intermediate wells as well, 37, approximately half of those have had PFAS detects. One other thing to note down here is that 3 locations that we have sampled actually have exceeded a PFAS screening level. 2 located in the alluvial system and 1 located in the perched intermediate. Those 3 locations are all affiliated with LA Pueblo canyons, and they're actually downstream of wastewater treatment plants. Wastewater treatment plants are a known source for PFAS contamination in the environment. The other thing I want to paint the picture of here is the regional aquifer that I've talked about so much, where we get our groundwater, our drinking water source from. Again, we've had very low detects for PFAS, and we have seen nothing above 8 nanograms per liter within the regional aquifer. So the regional aquifer may contain low amounts, but nothing nearing what's considered an exceedance level. So that is a very good news for the communities that are relying on their drinking water from those sources. The other thing to take away from this is that Los Alamos National Laboratory, while they were a very limited user of PFAS, does not appear to be a major source of PFAS that we're seeing in the environment. Again, all of the high detections that we're seeing are associated with these wastewater treatment plants in the environment. So I just want to wrap everything up here and leave some time for the questions I'm sure I'm going to come out of this report. But again, one of the things that we have is a very robust network of groundwater monitoring sites. And we're really focusing on a number of different things. As the bullet points here state, our interim facility-wide groundwater monitoring plan has really allowed for a lot of flexibility for how we sample groundwater at Los Alamos. In conjunction with NMED and their input and our input, we've been able to really focus the groundwater where it needs to be sampled and make those resources count in areas where we really need to be honing in on the environmental contaminants of concern. Additionally, the off-site monitoring ensures safety and quality of drinking water and water supply wells for the local communities. And I guess I skipped ahead to this last bullet point, but those annual updates are also helping ensure that emerging contaminants are being sampled, primarily PFAS, and then other contaminants as they are added will be sampled in the future as well. So at that point, I would like to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, David. I see the cards flying up.
Great.
So Mark, and then we'll go to Joseph, and then I have a few comments. Oh, then Roger. All right, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, the question I have is this World War II PFAS at LANL, is it considered a legacy waste? And does a PFAS cleanup plan exist for those 31 areas exceeding the screening levels?
Okay, that's a great question. So I didn't necessarily make it explicitly clear. So PFAS was developed during the Manhattan Project, but it was being used at the locations that were enriching uranium and plutonium, so Hanford and Oak Ridge. We don't really have a legacy history here at LANL since we were not involved in those activities. So that's actually one of the good things, one of the good news there with the LANL site. In terms of the exceedances, there's actually only 3 locations that exceed, not 31, so I want to make that distinction. We do have a number of locations that we've had detections at, but again, they're not considered exceedances based on the current standards for the 3 toxic pollutant listed PFAS. At this point, we are just monitoring them. There is no plans to do any kind of cleanup at the moment. Since they are confined to the alluvial system and the intermediate groundwater where we don't get our regional drinking water from, and the regional groundwater wells that are further down canyon that we've been monitoring show very low or no detects for PFAS. The current course of action is to continue sampling for them. I do want to add that beginning this year and monitoring year 2024, we are no longer just looking for the 3 PFAS compounds. We're now analyzing for a total of 44 PFAS compounds. The method that we use from our analytical laboratory allows us to look for additional PFAS compounds, and we really want to be proactive and understand what's in the environment in terms of PFAS. As this is an emerging contaminant, additional PFAS compounds eventually will be regulated. So we're really trying to be at the forefront of understanding what's in the environment so that we can make those decisions then as standards are lowered and as additional PFAS are introduced and regulated.
I'm a little confused about the origins, though. If this PFAS at LANL is not something that's historic, how do you know when it began and how it got there?
So we don't necessarily know when it began, but we know that the PFAS that we're seeing in the environment now at the majority of the sites can be traced back to sources like wastewater treatment plants. So one way that we do that was look at other geochemical constituents. So believe it or not, when we're going through our data and we see these high exceedances, we're also going to look at other contaminants of concern, such as nitrate levels. So locations with high nitrate are associated with typically effluent, sewage releases, septic systems. So at our highest locations where we're seeing these high levels of PFAS, we're also seeing elevated nitrate. Another thing that we did is look at pharmaceuticals in the environment. So the New Mexico Environment Department did a survey between, I believe, 2015 and 2018, looking at pharmaceuticals in the environment. So areas where we're seeing high levels of contamination also contain pharmaceuticals with them. Pharmaceuticals are not naturally occurring in the environment. The major source for pharmaceuticals are from wastewater treatment plants. So when we plot these up, we see that pharmaceuticals and PFAS have a very strong correlation. Nitrate and PFAS have a very strong correlation. So that gives us confidence of being able to find the origin, rather the source of these from these wastewater treatment plants. Additionally, as you mentioned, in terms of dating, so pharmaceuticals have they are not a regulated compound, at least not in this country. In some European countries they are. But the interesting thing about pharmaceuticals is they do have a finite date of when they came online. So we can actually use pharmaceuticals to age date water moving through the environment. And we're seeing certain pharmaceuticals that were introduced in the 1990s associated with these PFAS compounds. So really the PFAS that we're seeing in great amounts in the environment are pointing towards a source that is much younger than a lot of the other water that we're seeing based on some of the pharmaceutical compounds that were also associated with them. This study is ongoing. That's why I want to also look at these additional PFAS compounds. But that's a great question. It's something that we're definitely looking into, and we have a technical meeting with our groundwater folks, and this is a topic that we talk about quite regularly to really start getting an understanding of why we're seeing these, where we're seeing them, and potentially what that could mean in the future.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, David. Joseph?
Madam Chair, David, what an impressing. I'm relieved that you guys are jumping on this wagon. When I see this one, 3 locations, it talks about they have exceeded a PFAS screening level. I'm glad that you guys are dealing with that one, because one location at my house, and that plume is underneath my house and my community, and and we don't know the size of the plume, we don't know the width, the length, how deep, and the ancha, the tesuke, or whatever. But just to see the information that you're putting there, I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. I like you. Matter of fact, I love you, because it's straightforward. It's understood. It's not like so scientific that the average person, well, you know what I mean. I understand that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I can take this to and sit down with my dad and my mom on the kitchen table and say, "Mira, check this out," and it can be translated, right? So one question that I do have is your offsite. Is the Cochiti Dam part of your offsite well for LANL in terms of PFAS or radioactive or anything like that? Is it included?
So we do not sample quite as far down as Cochiti Lake and the dam. As part of our White Rock trip every year, we sample the Rio Grande in multiple locations. The farthest we sample down is at the confluence of where Frijoles Canyon and Bandelier National Monument
Yes, sir.
Goes into the Rio Grande. So we sample the water below that point in the Rio Grande. And we're sampling it for all those constituents you just mentioned. So we're looking not only for metals. One of the major concerns in the Rio Grande is nitrate from sources further upstream. But we're also looking for PFAS. We're looking for radionuclides, high explosives, all these other compounds. We also sample at Ottawa Bridge, so that would, in theory, be above any potential source. That way we have an understanding of what's coming into that stretch of the Rio Grande and what's exiting that stretch of the Rio Grande. So yes, we are in fact very diligent about making sure that we're sampling the Rio down there and looking at all those constituents.
So, Madam Chair and youngster, I'll call you youngster, so you're good. Outstanding for you to put that the screening, the groundwater screening criteria where you put NMAC part 20.6, was it 0.62?
20.6.2,
The
yes.
administrative code. It's interesting that, yes, the New Mexico Environment Department has that, but what bothers me about it, and I'll just say it, my mom would always say, te voy a decir la mera meta. Translated, I'm going to tell you the truth, and you better listen to mama. So, te voy a decir la mera meta. I'm not your mama, but I'm saying it. If you got this NMAC 20.62.2, 3103 in there, and it's human health standard listing, enforce it. And I'm just really annoyed that from a state government level, no quieren. For some reason, they don't want to enforce those issues on PFAS. That's impacting my community right now. It's out of your purview. I get that, but and whatever reason why they don't want to enforce it, maybe they're afraid of DOD. Look what they're having at Cannon Air Force Base. That big issue of the contamination of PFAS. We're not talking about the PFAS, PFAS, what's in a carpet and what's in your clothes and what's in your pots and pans. We're talking about the 6 compounds, PFOS, PFOA, that's there, that EPA continues not to acknowledge to make them officially part of the hazard index, et cetera, et cetera. And that's going to be up to Mr. Biden, our president, to make that happen, to determine that. But the point I want to make to you, and the final point I want to make to you, is that this one that you put in, 1 nanograms, right? Per
That's
liter?
correct. That's a part per trillion.
Per trillion is equivalent to 1 second in 31,688 years. Well, out of those compounds, there's 3 of them that are in my sangre. They're in my blood. And so this particular presentation you just did is outstanding. I understand what your role is. And I'll take this role that you just gave us to tell my mom and my dad and my family of why we need to stand up and do something with it. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. We appreciate that. Next up, we have Roger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dave, for the presentation. One of my questions that I took from your presentation, because being a firefighter person, it's been about 15 years since I know that we were using AFFF foam for firefighting purposes. A lot of training went on at the training facility on DP Road, and a lot of foam was flushed down that canyon between the main site road and DP Road. I don't know if that's where some of this contamination could be coming from, because even in the Cerro Grande fire, when we were fighting fire in the Cerro Grande, there was a huge amount of foam that was used to pre-treat homes in the broad spectrum of Los Alamos, because the fire was moving so fast that all you could do is go in and spray a residence and hope that that would be enough protection when the fire was coming through. But I'm curious too, because some of us as firefighters, when we're training, you've got people spraying you with foam. And in a plane crash scenario, if you're one of the rescuers going in to rescue people off of a plane, they're treating the whole area for petroleum spill with foam so that it can ignite and cause hazard. So what are the effects of that AFFF foam being exposed to the human body as opposed to being consumed in water sampling?
So I'm not a toxicologist. I'm not going to pretend I am. But my understanding for some of the literature that I've read, right, is that it's really somewhat similar to what we talk about with the radioactive elements. It's acute versus your chronic exposure, your limits. Some people have a higher tolerance for it, but ultimately, if folks are exposed to long-term, continuous amounts of PFAS, it can have adverse health effects. That's one of the reasons why, really within the last decade now, once these have become known, it is still considered an emerging contaminant. In my opinion, it is no longer an emerging contaminant. It is something that we really need to look at and understand in the environment and how it's moving through, and especially with effects like that. I was on a panel at the Waste Management Conference last week. One of the moderators there was an Air Force brat, he self-declared, and he said that as kids, they used to play in the foam. So he has very grave concerns about the types of effects that could have on him. So I think some of it is still being discovered as we go at this point, but it's something that we need to be looking at. We certainly are, and again, the effects are starting to become more clear in that, again, long-term exposure as opposed to if you're in a plane crash and you get sprayed once, seems to have a much more strong effect, that cumulative effect of PFAS on humans.
Yeah, and thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dave, for that.
Thank you, Roger. Patricio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, David, for that interesting presentation there. It's very influential. I did have a question about some of your testing sites here. I've noticed for the last 30 years, there's been the firefighters there south of the airport always shooting foam and water out into the canyon. And I was just curious, have you guys sampled that canyon for any of that PFAS? I do have a couple of firefighter friends out in Los Alamos who are now retired. They did tell me they stopped using PFAS up in Los Alamos back in 2018. But prior to that, they were having to get tested on a monthly basis because they're constantly in contact with PFAS and always shooting that into that canyon. And so have you guys tested East Canyon for any PFAS?
Yes, so we have an alluvial well in that canyon, in DP Canyon. It's actually the location that has the highest concentrations of PFAS. However, I think there's multiple sources going into that location. I think definitely the firefighting facility there is one. There's also a canyon that just catches a lot of runoff from town. The Smith's parking lot, for instance, up in Los Alamos, discharges into that canyon. The airport across the street can discharge into that canyon. The highway along there discharges into that canyon. So that is an alluvial well. Again, the alluvium there is approximately 12 feet deep, so it's an aquifer that's about 12 feet below the ground surface. Does have a significant amount of PFAS at that particular location. So we are looking at that. That's a site that we're testing annually and monitoring right now to see if there's any kind of long-term trends that emerge, and then eventually, we're not moving into any kind of remedy or remediation at that location at this point, but we just want to ensure that we understand where that water's going and what potential effects it might have on other locations that are downstream of it.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patricio. David, I had a few comments. So PFAS is now, according to the EPA, a contaminant of special concern. It's been elevated. The governor of New Mexico had sent a request to EPA that PFAS be regulated at a higher rate. So EPA is considering, as of February 8th, I believe, to regulate or elevate PFAS as a hazardous chemical, which is going to have some implications for all of us. And of course, the more methodology that's being produced, and this is for everyone, the more methodology characterization is being produced and understanding, those standards that we have now are going to be they'll be increased by lowering the amount of PFAS that we consider toxic. And so that is something that we should all be aware of, not to fearmonger or anything, but just know that this is, and this has been around since the 30s when it was developed by DuPont and 3M. And so we have had exposures. There are different types, which we see consistent with wastewater treatment plants. Those types, at least in some of the studies I've done, those types come from people, from what we wear, from our household items. Those are called the short chains, because they have a shorter carbon-fluorine bond. The longer chains are the ones similar to what Joseph is experiencing in his community. And the resolution to what resolve is there to cleaning these up? It's ongoing. It is not easy. It is, and one other thing, other than sampling the water sites, are you also doing soil screening in those sites? Or other sites where it's dry, but there could be PFAS in the soils? Because another exposure pathway is, it's not just water, it's also through soils and air.
That's correct. So that's an excellent comment and observation. So we are looking at all different media, and also in conjunction with Triad, we have a PFAS working group set up with them. So Triad is spearheading more of the soil, air, biota monitoring, as that's in their particular contract and purview. We are looking at the groundwater here, surface water, and sediment samples as well are starting to be sampled for PFAS. So we are trying to work together to really understand PFAS throughout the entire environment. Groundwater kind of was the first one to start at the LANL site. So we've done a really good job of understanding it in the environment there. Within the next 2 to 3 years, once we get more results from all those other media, I think we're going to have a really good picture and understanding of potential additional sources within LANL itself and how it's moving through the environment and where we can really kind of start expecting to find it.
Thank you. And LANL's historic use of PFAS, although with the upgrades to the firefighting foams, as our firefighters here have used, and of course on their equipment. Prior to that, it was, except for what you said, it was found on the pipes during Manhattan.
So I know at LANL they
project.
did use firefighting foam in fire suppression systems in certain facilities.
Okay.
But that was very localized. That has since been containerized and removed. Some of it is still on site, waiting, pending shipment for it to be off site. But again, it was not quite like a DoD site where they were spraying down planes and trash plumes in large areas with training exercises, etc. So AFFF is a fairly minor constituent at LANL in general.
Right. Thank you. That's what I was trying to say, but my voice is breaking. So I appreciate that, and thank you for your presentation. We have one more question, and then we'll move to public comment. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, I appreciate that LANL's trying to reduce any PFAS introduced into the site area. I'm also part of a GAS special task force that sets policy, and one of the things we found out was PFAS is in places you wouldn't expect, like a water bottle is released from a mold using PFAS. So with regard to policy, it's a question and you may not know the answer. Do you know if there is a resistance for LANL to purchase anything that may have PFAS in it?
I can't actually answer for LANL itself. I know within our sampling regime right now, just speaking for our groundwater sampling, we are becoming very sensitive to make sure that we're not using PFAS. One, because when we sample, right, we don't want to accidentally introduce PFAS from a source and get false positives. So just from a sampling perspective, we've really moved away from PFAS products. And that includes stuff like sunscreens, insect repellents. There's a list of those items that don't include PFAS. Clothing that doesn't include PFAS. Personal care items that don't include PFAS. So I'm just talking from a very small perspective, but our sampling crew, our field sampling crew, every day when they come in to sample, since we're sampling for PFAS pretty much everywhere now, all the time, we're moving in a direction where we are minimizing our PFAS footprint with our sampling crews and teams to, one, ensure that it's not being impacted in our samples, but two, it has the added benefit of then those folks are being exposed to less PFAS just in general.
Check the ski wax too.
I've heard ski wax. I just was talking to someone about that last week at the Waste Management Conference. It's pretty amazing how many different applications, and you don't even think of them, PFAS was used in.
Thank you. Yeah, ski wax and dental floss. And so, quickly, and then we will move to public comment. Just one last thing. So the New Mexico Toxic Pollutant Working Group is working with, to hopefully add more PFAS constituents to the toxic pollutant list, which is under New Mexico Administrative Code 20.6.2.
Correct.
T. And also we're hoping to enhance the narrative standard to, don't want to say we want to increase the cancer risk. We don't want to lower the cancer risk. We want to lower, we're going to fix this. We're working to fix this. It's funny language. When you say it one way, it comes out completely wrong. So look out for that. Hopefully it'll happen in the next year or so. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what we're anticipating, and that's why, again, beginning this monitoring year, we're looking at those additional compounds as well. So we really want to understand what's out there before these regulations come into practice, so that when they do hit, we're not quite as surprised as some other sites might be.
Excellent. And you're using EPA methodology, and that's why you're reducing your PFAS when you're doing your sampling.
Right. So not to get into the nitty-gritty, we are currently using EPA 537.1 modified. That is going away as a DOCAP certified method, so we're going to be moving to the EPA 1633 method beginning next year.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you. Excellent. Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you. I want to thank the board again for having me and allowing me to present. And I really enjoyed your earlier discussion as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Great. All right, so we'll move on to public comment. Do we have anybody signed up? Bridget? We have Scott Kovac. Hi, Scott.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
That's good.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Scott Kovac. I'm with Nuclear Watch New Mexico, and I want to thank you, Chair Elena, for your excellent service over the past couple of years. And we really appreciate it. And I also appreciate the work of the CAB as a whole for their hard work on these difficult issues. This week was budget week. The DOE budget request for fiscal year 2025 came out. And in case you missed some of these numbers, LANL cleanup is currently scheduled to be end in 2044 is the current end date for cleanup at Los Alamos. That does not include excavating any MDAs, any material disposal areas, are planned to be left behind. And so that breaks out into numbers-wise. There's a chart in the budget request that shows approximately $4.6 billion spent to date on cleanup at Los Alamos. And so the remaining amounts, they have a low range of 4.1 billion and a high range of 6.1 billion still to go. And so you can see that these are pretty large numbers. But once again, the high range of $6.1 billion estimate for all the future cleanup at Los Alamos does not include the material disposal area excavations. So, I mean, these seem like huge numbers, but they're not so large when you consider that Los Alamos in 1 year, in the same budget request in fiscal year 25, is requesting $4 billion in 1 year for weapons activities at the laboratory. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Scott. And I appreciate your constant presence and your diligence, and thank you. Anybody else signed up online? No? Okay, well. Now we have an update from our Executive Director, Bridget Maestas.
Madam Chair, I just want to highlight some dates on the meeting schedule. We have a subcommittee meeting combined April 24th. We'll have a presentation from Lauren Foster and 3B on groundwater modeling as a tool to support remediation decision-making. April 30th through May 2nd, the spring chairs meeting hosted by Portsmouth, and we have Manny who will be attending, and we'll need one other member, so if anybody's interested, please let me know if you're available to attend. We also have June 12th, we're trying to schedule a LANL tour of EM sites with N3B, so we're working on that. Keep that on your schedule. And we will be traveling to WIP for a tour on October 17th. We will have 2 groups of 10 that will be able to go down and tour underground. So if you haven't already, let me know if you will be able to attend that one also. No. It is an overnight trip. We will travel on the 16th, stay overnight, and get up early and do the safety hour, and then we'll do the tour. So. And I'll turn it over to Manice for recognition of our outgoing members.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Bridget. It is my distinct honor to thank 3 people who have served on this board for a number of years. We will see them go off the board today, unfortunately. But I've worked with these folks, and we've worked with them for their 3 maximum tours of duty, 2-year tours for a maximum of 6 years. In fact, I think, Elena, you actually served an unexpired term. You began. So 6+ years for Elena and for Mr. Light. Also, Marty Hewlett will be leaving us because he's got an exciting adventure ahead of him. He's retiring right from UNM in Taos, and then I believe going to Rome to teach at the Pontifical College, if I'm not mistaken. So how could we say no to that, right? So we really appreciate Marty's 2 years on the board, and we would like to recognize you folks and thank you so much for your service. And if you have anything that you'd like to say as you leave the board, and Elena, thank you for your hard work. I know it's been a lot to chair, vice chair, chair committees, write recommendations. We appreciate it very much. And Mr. Life, thank you for always being here, and we've enjoyed knowing you, and please don't be a stranger. You can always serve on a committee if you care to, as a public member, both of you. And Marty, hopefully we'll see you in Rome. I would love to see you in Rome. Oh, and we've got some certificates, and we thank you very much, and I'm sure Ellie would like to thank you as well.
In the short time I've had to get to know you all, it has just been a tremendous honor. The energy, the informative nature, all that you bring to this advisory board, it is just so tremendously beneficial, and just all of the recommendations, and this goes for everybody on the advisory board, but you all who are leaving us in particular have really done, in my opinion, you have done an excellent service to the public and to the taxpayers by providing this important feedback and this important information so that we can utilize that in planning and ultimately succeed in our mission, which is to serve the taxpayers and to serve the public. So I genuinely appreciate everything that all of you have done and brought to the table. Thank you.
So if you could come up for a picture, we'd appreciate it very much. On another positive note, we do expect our new 5 members to join us at the next meeting, so we're hopeful that headquarters will be able to do that soon. Thank you.
Okay, did we want final statements from our outgoing members quickly? Marty and Roger, did you have anything you'd like to say?
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for the ceremony and the honoring. The short 2 years I've been on the board, I didn't expect that it would only be 2 years, and this other project came up, and I have to leave you all. But I have to say that I expected to come on the board. Stan Rivelis talked me into it, and I expected to come and hear all the science and technology that I did hear. But what I didn't expect was the dedication and the collegiality and the interaction that you all have had with each other and with the people at Los Alamos and N3B and the state. It's just been a wonderful experience to see the kind of work that's being done by this board. It's so important. Joseph and I were talking about this beforehand. So important what you do. And I will be following the work as a member of the public for sure, because I totally respect everything that you guys are doing. So thank you again.
Thank you, Marty. Roger, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's been quite an experience. I mean, it's been a long, drawn-out process. COVID had to get in the way and change everything, and of course, the more we move along, the more things change. So I see a lot of good people participating, and I look forward to them carrying on the work that several people have passed on to us as we were coming through the cab. So thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Well, I need to correct for the minutes that it was less than 6 years. 2 months short.
Oh, okay.
I wish. I wanted to say thank you. I've met so many incredible people, and to see the progression of the community coming together, and it just takes these fantastic people that I've come to know in the last few years, how we've built up this community to make it more of a dialogue and more respectful and more listening. I appreciate that so much, and I appreciate so many of you, and I've made many, many lifelong friends. So keep up the good work, Patricio. I hand over the care to you. You get to be the dad now. They're yours. If you need anything, let me know. I'll be glad to support you. And Manny, congratulations. This is for you. I'll hand that over to you. And yeah, you all take good care and take good care of each other as we continue to take care of our beautiful New Mexico. So thank you all. Take us out.
On that note, I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.